Okay, go ahead, Ted.
So we got everything. We got the, okay.
Yes, we're both around.
All right, great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning Commission of the City of Danbury, September 12th, 2023 at 7:30. Let the record show we will begin with a roll call at 7:34. Commissioner David. Commissioner David is here. Commissioner Hawley.
Here.
Commissioner Helinski.
Here.
Commissioner Jowdy. Commissioner Jowdy is here. Commissioner Malillo.
Here.
Commissioner Rea is absent. Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Duran is absent. Commissioner Mejia is, we're going to put down for absent right now. Commissioner Botello.
Here.
And I am Commissioner Haddad. So I'm going to say that Commissioner Bennett, where are you? I see you. Commissioner Bennett, I'm going to put you in for Commissioner Fay. And the reason why I'm doing that is I know you've been put in as a regular member. However, you were sworn in as an alternate. You have to get sworn in as a regular. This has the same powers and duties by putting you in tonight on Commissioner Fay's slot as it would as a regular member anyway. All right, so if you would, so we have now Commissioner Botello has replaced Commissioner Coelho. I think they did that purposely because it rhymes so nicely. And we now have Commissioner Bennett, who was put in as a regular, but we're seating him tonight in for Commissioner Bennett. So we have 8 for tonight on the regular, and we're going to, if Commissioner Mejia shows up, put her in for Commissioner Rea. The next regular meeting is scheduled for September 26th, 2023. If everyone has their flags, and I'll call on Commissioner Botello in a moment. I know he has a statement to make. If everyone could please stand, if they have flags, hold them up, and let's join Commissioner Botello with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Botello, I know you had a comment to make. Why don't you go ahead and make a comment?
Because I'm a newcomer, I'd like to just make a brief statement saying that I feel honored and privileged to have been seated to become part of this important governing body of the city of Danbury, a great city. And whether this position is temporary or permanent after the election, I will embrace this as a very important experience in my life. And I thank you for all for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for those nice words. And Commissioner Botello, we go back, we go back into the early 70s, late 60s, I guess. So I know you and I know your dedication, appreciated. And a lot of people in the city of Danbury appreciate it. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we? Acceptance of the minutes. Commission members, everybody should have received the August 22nd, 2023. The agenda says 2020. Oh, everybody's got August 2022's minutes too, but we're looking at the August 22nd, 2023 minutes. Commission members, what's your pleasure on that? And is there a motion to accept the minutes of August 22nd, 2023? Motion made by Commissioner Jowdy. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Helinski. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. So the minutes of August 22nd, 2023 are unanimously accepted. I will now call on Ms. Calitro, who has a comment on the July 25th, 2023 minutes?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay,
thank
please.
you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to see if we could get a motion to clarify the minutes that were of the July 25th, 2023 meeting that were approved by the Zoning Commission on August 12th, relative to the petition Bright Ravens is Danbury LLC, and it's at the end of the transcription of the minutes where it indicates Mr. Hawley made the motion to approve the petition for the following reasons. He went through it. Mr. Coelho seconded the motion. Chairman Haddad took a roll call vote, and the motion to approve was defeated with 5 ayes, but in the parentheses for the 5 people, there's only 3 people listed. And so one of them that's missing is Commissioner Hawley, who actually made the motion. But we're also missing Commissioner Hylinski, who is present at the meeting. So this is just a clarification that the 5 votes is correct, excuse me. But I think we should list all of the members to avoid any kind of confusion later on. So in the parentheses, it would say Commissioners Hawley, or Mr. Hawley, Mr. Coelho, Ms. Hylinski, Mr. Jowdy, and Mr. Rea that voted aye on that motion. So it's just a clarification. So if you could entertain a motion to clarify, we're not really amending it because those were the 5 and there are 5 votes. We're just clarifying that those were the 5.
Yeah, thank you for that. Commission members, everybody understands that, I'm sure. If I can get a motion to,
Can I ask one clarifying question before the
Yeah.
motion, Mr. Haddad?
sure, Commissioner Malillo, please.
Ms. Calicho, I know we're not amending it, and I know you said we're clarifying it, but would it be better to have a motion to correct them?
In my discussions with Corporation Counsel, they just indicated it's more of kind of a clarification because we're not correcting it. There were 5 votes. We're just clarifying who the 5 votes kind of were.
Right.
I mean, again, the only one that's missing from them, if you read the whole paragraph, is Ms. Hylinski's name. Because
Right.
it does indicate that Mr. Hawley made the motion. So but again, one could assume he voted in the positive as an
Right.
aye, but I would just, she indicated we could just clarify the record. So I'm using,
The only reason I'm wondering is, are we gonna be, is Joanne gonna be filing an updated version of the minutes with the town clerk's office? Or is this just a clarification that we're reflecting in these minutes for tonight's meeting?
we can include it in this, the minutes of this meeting, and she'll be filing those. And then we'll keep a copy in the file for this petition.
Right, yeah, that's why I asked, because if we're just noting it in these minutes, then I think the clarification is probably fine. But if we were going to be submitting a new set of minutes as part of the public record, then I would think it would almost need to be corrected.
Yeah, that's what she indicated, just so you could clarify it in this, and then we keep it in places we needed in case anybody went back to look for it.
Okay, then I'll make a motion, Mr. Haddad, for the clarifications as put forth tonight by Ms. Calitro regarding those set of minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
That was by Commissioner Jowdy. Yes. Under discussion, yes, I think the clarification works as advised by us, the Corporation Counsel, but additionally, when we file these minutes, it's gonna cover it anyway. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Oh boy, let me see where I gotta find all my stuff here. Got it. First petition this evening. The first public hearing this evening is a petition of the city of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 3E9D and 10A1A of the zoning regulations. Change of issuing authority for certificate of location approval for motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses for zoning commission to zoning enforcement officer. Let's see what I have here. Okay, so let me read the planning commission 8.3A recommendation. This is dated August 18th. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, you didn't read the legal notice.
Yeah, the legal notice,
I
yeah.
also just remembered, you know why? Because I had this petition on top of it. I also remembered that I have to read the virtual meeting introduction. This meeting of the Danbury Zoning Commission, thank you, by the way, for the reminder. This meeting of the Danbury Zoning Commission is being held on Zoom as a virtual meeting. Even though this meeting is a virtual meeting, members of the public and interested parties continue to have the opportunity to participate in the meeting in a couple of different ways. You can participate via Zoom and see the audio and the video, or you can call in by phone and participate via audio only. Please be aware that we may have to mute your microphone or telephone to avoid an echo or some other background noise. This is also being streamed live via YouTube. Instructions on how to participate in the meeting appear on the City of Danbury website, and all of the documents and materials that apply to the matters to be discussed during this meeting, including the agenda, are also available on the City of Danbury website. As always, if you have any questions, please contact the City of Danbury Planning and Zoning Department. As a reminder, the entire meeting will be posted on and can be seen on the City of Danbury website. We will follow the posted agenda as per standard practice. If prior to the meeting, any questions or comments on agenda items were submitted via email to Sharon Calitro, those comments will be read during the appropriate portion of the meeting. Finally, please remember that technology glitches sometimes do occur. Please be patient if that happens. Regarding the legal notice. Notice is hereby given to the Zoning Commission of the City of Danbury. We'll hold public hearings commencing at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, September 12, 2023, in a web-based meeting hosted on Zoom to consider the following matters. Petition of the City of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend Section 3E9D and 10A1A of the zoning regulations, change of issuing authority for certificate of location approval for motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses from the Zoning Commission to Zoning Enforcement Officer. Second petition of Danbury Mall LLC to amend sections 2, 3F2 of and add sections 5I and 8E4A to the zoning regulations. Parentheses, new mixed-use regional mall, MURM zoning district, and associated amendments. Copies of these applications are on file in the town clerks and planning and zoning offices for public inspection. Parties and interests and citizens shall have an opportunity to be heard at this time. Agenda to be posted will include instructions on how to access the Zoom meeting and application materials and view the meeting in real time on YouTube. Theodore J. Haddad, Jr. Chairman, posted on the city website and town clerk's office on August 28th. 2023, published in the News Times, September 1st, 2023, and September 8th, 2023, purchase order 2024-8. Additionally, this agenda was filed in the town clerk's office on September 12th, 2023 at 5:03 p.m. So, where did I miss that? I missed it here. Okay. So let's now go to the first public hearing from the petition of the City of Danbury as read in or previously. Let me read the 8.3A recommendation from the Planning Commission dated August 18th, 2023 to Theodore J. Haddad, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Zoning Commission, from Arnold E. Finaldi, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Planning Commission. Regarding 8.3A referral, petition of the City of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 3E9D and 10A1A of the zoning regulations, changes of issuing authority for certificate of location approval of motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses from the Zoning Commission to the Zoning Enforcement Officer. At the web-based Zoom meeting held on August 16, 2023, the City of Danbury Planning Commission voted to give the above referenced petition a positive recommendation with following reasons. This complies with the Plan of Conservation Development because it ensures compliance with Public Act 23-40, which became effective July 1st, 2023, and the state statutes that govern the motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses. The motion to give this a positive recommendation was made by Mrs. Hofstetter, seconded by Mr. Chioccio, and passed unanimously by voice vote with 5 ayes from Mr. Chioccio, Mrs. Hofstetter, Mr. Sylvain, Mr. Haas, and Chairman Finaldi. Additionally, let me read the Westcog 8.3B recommendation. The opinion of Westcog staff is that the proposal is of local interest with minimal intermunicipal impact. Therefore, it is not being forwarded to adjacent municipalities, and the regional staff is making no comment. If I can now go to Ms. Calitro, if you can review for us your staff report. There she is.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Chairman. For the record, Sharon Calitro, I'm the Planning Director. So we submitted a petition to amend sections 3E9D and 10A1a of the zoning regulations to comply with section 30 of Public Act 23-40, which became effective July 1st of this year. That act provides in section 30 that anyone who desires to obtain a license from the commissioner of the DMV for dealing in or repairing motor vehicles must first obtain a certificate of approval from the zoning enforcement officer, and the ZEO is required to affirm that the proposed location and use of the property conforms to the zoning regulations of the municipality. Prior to the act in Danbury, the authority to issue the location approval, as you all know, rested with this zoning commission. And I included an excerpt from the Public Act. This petition amends the pertinent sections of the zoning regulations that address the certificate of location approval for the use, all other land use approvals that are necessary to operate remain intact. In other words, if you need site plan approval or if it's a waiver or whatever, that would still be processed as it would normally. It just wouldn't be submitted as a petition to the zoning commission. In terms of the plan of conservation and development, the petition is necessary to ensure compliance with the Public Act and the state statutes governing licensing of the use. Therefore, it is deemed consistent with the POCD. And in conclusion, the amendments to the zoning regulations are necessary to address Section 30 of the Public Act that are now in effect. And so we therefore recommend approval. And the last sentence has to deal with the Planning Commission, which I think they already did, include in their report statement of findings for consistency of the proposed amendment with the POCD. Fairly straightforward. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Commission members, questions of Ms. Calitro. Commissioner Melillo, please.
Ms. Calitro, I have a couple questions. First, remind me, I'm drawing a blank on this one. Most of the auto repair and dealers licenses, are those special exception uses or general allowed uses in the zones?
Oh, good question. Most, there's some that are special exceptions and some that are permitted uses. However, they all would then require, if they're new and they weren't like a transfer, they would require a location approval from the commission. So they would first have to process it internally, either administratively or through the planning commission, then come to the zoning commission. I don't know what the balance is off the top of my head.
Okay, so give me, okay, so so the change of issuing authority for certificate of location approval. So if it's a first time use, like what we have seen over on Myrie Brook, those would still have to become for a use permission before one of the two commissions at a public hearing, or
not before the zoning commission at all. If it's a special exception, it goes before the planning commission.
No, yeah, I know that. But if
It
it's
wouldn't come before you at any point in time.
So, and if it's a permitted use, not a
Then it's
special,
a departmental review, and once it got
Administrative.
departmental site plan approval and or a waiver, I'm not sure it would even qualify for that, but it got a site plan, they would just go then to the zoning enforcement officer to sign the K7.
so that means that this amendment, and I understand this is something that, you know, I hate, and Mr. Haddad hates. We've talked about it numerous times on this commission and gone on the record, not liking the dictates coming down from Hartford that were held to. But so Hartford is telling us in their infinite wisdom that there is no need for any member of the Danbury community to have any say in regards to a motor vehicle license going up in their neighborhood.
Well, I mean, it's a yes and no answer. I wouldn't necessarily say any say, because if it's a special exception, it's an automatic public hearing. If it's a permitted use in the zone, it doesn't trip anything to be a special exception like the trip multiplier table, which it probably wouldn't, but it might. And it didn't need to go to the planning commission. It would be processed departmentally, but it would not come to the zoning commission for a public hearing.
Yeah,
And you're correct. That is, I mean, it's what the statute says. They took out all the language where it said, except at any town that might have a combined planning zoning commission. That's the language they removed from the statute. And they instead said, before you go to the commissioner, you must get from the zoning enforcement officer of the municipality where such license is desired, a certificate of approval affirming the proposed location and use of the property conforms to the zoning regulations of the municipality.
Right, yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't care what body would solicit the public input in regards to this. My whole thing, and I'm just wanting to clarify here is, so it's up to the municipality to decide if it's a permitted use or a special exception use. If it's a permitted use, then the public has no say. If it's a special if the municipality deems it a special exception use, then the planning commission would at least be able to provide the residents of the city of Danbury to have a say.
Yes, but don't forget, a special exception use is really a use that's already deemed acceptable in that zone. And the question becomes, in that specific location, is it appropriate? And for which the planning commission could then put conditions,
Right.
on it. But yes, yeah. The only thing you possibly would to change every automotive repair to a special exception, which would then trigger a public hearing. But again, it's a use that's already been deemed acceptable on the broad sense in that zone.
Well, yeah, and every time it was before us, we always recognized it was deemed acceptable. We had the site plan approval or waiver and stuff along, but we would then decide whether that location was actually a viable location. And we had the opportunity to put some restrictions on it, just like the planning commission could do on a special exception use. So would it make sense for us to investigate moving all of these to special exception uses under our zoning regs, just to protect the citizens of Danbury's right to have a say in regards to these facilities?
I guess we could look at that and put it on our list of things to, assess. I'd have to go back through the zoning regulations and actually, hold on one second, because let me just pull out my list of uses in every zone and I'll tell you where it's allowed. Just give me 1 second. Automotive, sale or repair. I think it's under sale or repair automotive. Or really, sale, rental, and or repair automobiles. We're talking about CG20 and the CA80. So
I think there's some in
they may, you know what, it may be a moot point, because let me just check and see if they're all special exception. Sale or rental repair automobiles in the CG20 is a permitted use, so that wouldn't go to the planning commission, and I believe it's the same. Sale, rental, repair of automobile, yeah. The same as in the CA80. And then in that IL40, we just added it as the sale of automobiles and trucks. That's a special exception. So that would, because that's in the IL40 zone. I'm not sure actually it would affect any other zones, but I don't even think it's not in the, no, it's not in the CBD zone. So honestly, it's not in a lot of zones. So the two general commercial zones, which are general commercial zones, and then the one IL40 zone that this was added to. So
yeah, my concern
we'd have to move them all. We'd have to move them all.
Yeah, I mean, because all of those have a potential of bordering a residential zone, a residential neighborhood, or some, even if it's a minimal impact of it. That's, I mean, let's face it, 90% of the time there weren't any issues, but every once in a while something popped up that we needed to take some extra consideration in, and I just see this as an example of Hartford, truthfully, squashing the voice of the Danbury citizen. I understand we have to do this. I understand we have to come in line with with what Hartford wants us to do, and so it has to pass. So therefore, most likely, I have to vote yes. I mean, I can vote no if it's going to pass, and with good conscience, just as a protest vote. But but I just wanted to clarify here that this is Hartford squashing the citizen's voice.
I don't have really a comment about that. It's just, I scour the public acts to see if there's anything that affects us, or any authority, of any commission, and here's where we're at, so,
Mhm.
in this
Thank you.
particular use.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad.
Thank you. Commissioner Malillo, while hate is a strong word, you are correct. I hate it. Commissioner Bennett.
Under Connecticut, and I've been through this 10 times in the last 2 years. That regulation was really started for body shops. Under that umbrella of motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses, it's body shops, it's used car lots, it's the guy who sells the tires. The dealership, especially in any town, it's very, very difficult to get a license in the state of Connecticut. What they make you go through is 10 times more than what they did 10 years ago. So I don't think they're trying to jam something down the local municipality's throat. Honestly, I think they're doing a great job of protecting the state and the environment. You can't put a body shop in Connecticut, in Danbury anymore. They don't want them. They don't want them in Connecticut. So it's very difficult to get a license through the state of Connecticut. I'm trying to understand everything that's being said here, and it's not an easy thing as a car dealer to open up a car dealership. And I keep on reminding the people in Connecticut how much money we raise and how many people we employ. The dealerships that just opened up in Danbury are huge. The amount of people that we're going to hire are huge. See that Mercedes store? They're going to put 60 people in that place. So every store, from a little store that's on the other side of town, the Mercedes store, now they're building a $10 million fortress. My only question is that building, how high it is. But it's not easy in Connecticut. It's the hardest state I've ever got licensed for a car dealership is Connecticut. So.
Thank you. Ms. Calitro, any comments on Commissioner Bennett? No. Okay.
No, I mean, I'm just amending the regs to comply with the statutes.
Got it.
And you'll see later on in this evening, a new petition, because my mistake, I missed 2 other places in the zoning regulations. So I came back and with the second petition, do the same thing. I mean, it's got to go to the ZEO instead of the zoning commission.
Commission members, any other questions of Ms. Calitro at this time? Commission members, anything of Ms. Calitro? Thank you, Ms. Calitro. So I assume your staff report comments were also speaking in favor of the petition?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there Councilman Rotello, hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Paul Rotello for the record, 13 Linden Place, Danbury. There aren't enough used car dealerships next door to me, said nobody ever. It's just way, way too hard to put a used car dealership next to my grandma's house, said nobody ever. In Danbury or Bethel or anybody in any town in Connecticut, any residential town that borders maybe a semi-industrial or retail district. I think Westcog is off a little bit on this. The local zoning commission here in Danbury may be dealing with this, but it's a statewide issue. And I think they're missing the boat on not weighing in. My feelings about state preemption are as strong as Commissioner Malillo's and you, Commissioner Haddad. It makes me angry enough to actually want to run for Hartford office and yell at people like a maniac. But I'm not going to do that. I think at some point between what they did, what the state has done, and continues to do with state preemption, which you guys have been through at least once before this year, like for instance, with the outdoor dining that was forced upon the zoning commission, forced upon the director to come up with those regs. And I'm sure this is not the end of it. We hear a lot of stuff about housing shortages and the tremendous amount of pressure and real problems. And then something like this comes along, an outdoor dining, where somebody just seems to be enthralled to a lobbyist. All due respect to the people who make their living selling cars, but all due respect to people in the business, the people in Hartford occasionally appear to be captive of these very targeted lobbyists and wind up crafting laws that benefit them at the absolute expense of the people that supposedly they represent. I mean, we send all over Connecticut people to Hartford to represent our interests. And we wind up with legislation like this that takes away our right. Now, our right to influence local decisions. I'm not asking Hartford for a right to influence Hartford decisions. I guess I can call my representative or my senator or somebody else's representative, senator, or take an ad out or hire my own lobbyist or whatever. But it really grinds my teeth to have them take away the right that I had to come to a meeting and just express an opinion. And when you remove that, you really remove a major cog in the gear of public participation in civic life. They're basically telling us you don't have a right to speak. It's like this. This is who we're going to be from now on. It's so important to allow people to get drunk on a sidewalk, create a disturbance, and throw up, that we're not going to allow you to influence that decision. It's so right to put a used car dealership next door to your house that we're not going to give you. It's so important to do that. It's so important to have a guy next door to you selling Corollas at 11 o'clock at night that we're not going to give you any say in this whatsoever. As you know, I'm on the city council, and if this were to be litigated, I and the other 20 members would have to approve the expenditures to litigate it. And I just want to put you guys on notice that if you voted against this and it was litigated, I would support the litigation and I would support the suit. I would support a suit against the state of Connecticut because enough is enough. These are really important decisions that affect not only the quality of life in a neighborhood, excuse me, but the value of homes. I'm going to have to put this on, turn it on and hang it up. Affect the quality of life in neighborhoods and affect the value of property in this area. And people look to this commission to help them navigate that. And when they can't address the commission, whether it's this one or planning, and I agree with both Councilman Melillo and Director Calitro about making it all a special exception. And from Commissioner Melillo's point of view, and also from Director Calitro's statement, that even if you were to do that, you would basically be saying that it's allowable under certain conditions. That's not enough for me. I want to keep it the way it is, not because I'm necessarily conservative, but I really believe that people have the right to address these land use bodies, and the state has no right to take that right away from us. And we need to send them a message, a strong message, because they keep doing this. This is not really big issue stuff. They're trying to do it with the big issue stuff, like you know, the homeless population, affordable housing. But they're also doing on these really little things that just smack of insider trading. Nobody from Hartford called me up and said, "Hey, Paul, we represent you. We're thinking about taking away your right to speak at a used car dealership placement in your neighborhood." That's okay, right? That's a telephone call I never got. We were never informed that the state of Connecticut was doing that. Now, as you know, I was on the Plan of Conservation and Development, and Director Calitro said that this abides by that. But let's just put it on the record that this particular piece of legislation came out after the POCD Commission met and ended its tenure. So we weren't thinking about this last year. What we had thought about when it came to being in sync with the state had to do with lots of things. It did not have to do with putting outdoor dining and outdoor drinking underneath your window, and it did not have to do with placing used car dealership next door to you without any input from you at all. Had those things come up, I guarantee you at least one person on the POCD would have taken a different view about the whole situation. Not telling you what to do, but I am saying that if this petition were to fail and it were to be litigated, I would take a very positive view about supporting that litigation and supporting you guys in that fight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Rotello. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Rotello? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Not hearing any, I'll go to Ms. Calitro. Did you want to respond? I guess, let me ask you a silly question. What would happen if a petition like this, we do get some of these from Hartford. What would happen if this petition did not get approved, if it got denied?
The law's a law. I mean,
Yeah.
it's in effect. You don't, I mean, I was going to make a comment that my opinion about consistency with the POCD was more of a global statement relative to the laws changed, whether we like it or not, and our regs should reflect the law. I don't think we really have jurisdiction, whether it's in our regulations or not, for us to require somebody to come submit a petition, pay everything, submit a petition, go to a public hearing when the statutes say they don't have to do it. So that was my statement relative to consistency.
Yeah.
We didn't get into the weeds about it, other than, right, we don't want to give up local control. I'm right with you, Paul, Councilman Rotello, in every sense of the word. I'm just saying we don't have a lot of choice. It kind of stinks, in my opinion.
Commission members, anything else of Ms. Calitro? You're all set, Ms. Calitro? I don't think we're waiting for anything. I think in order, it would be in order to have a motion to close this public hearing. Is there anyone who wants to make that motion to close this public hearing this evening? Anyone want to make a motion to close the public hearing? I see Commissioner Helinski's hand. Motion to close the public hearing, second by Commissioner Botello.
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Madam,
Commissioner Malillo, there you go.
I see no reason, again, like I've said earlier, not that I'm thrilled by this petition, but I see no reason why we can't move this item number 1 under old business.
Thank you very much. Commission members, there's a motion made by Commissioner Malillo to move this petition. It was just closed, City of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, as it relates to the certificate of location approval, to number 1 under old business for discussion and possible action. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Commissioner Jody. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So it will be number 1.
Hey.
under-
I had to kill that call because you were calling me right when I was speaking.
Paul, you're
Councilman
on.
Rotello,
You gotta
please.
mute yourself, Paul.
Sorry about that, guy.
That's all right. It was Commissioner Chianese a few weeks ago, and now Commissioner Rotello. Okay, let's see, moving on here. Second petition this evening is a petition of Danbury Mall LLC to amend sections 2, 3F2 of and add sections 5I and 8E4A to the zoning regulations in parentheses, new mixed-use regional mall zoning district and associated amendments. Let me read the Planning Commission 8-3A recommendation, September 7, 2023, to Theodore J. Haddad, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Zoning Commission, Ronald D. Finaldi, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Planning Commission, regarding this petition of the Danbury Mall. At the web-based Zoom meeting held on September 6, 2023, the City of Danbury Planning Commission voted to give the above referenced petition a positive recommendation for the following reasons. Number one, the Plan of Conservation Development, POCD, and Danbury's Affordable Housing Plan both recommend exploring opportunities to create affordable housing. This petition provides an incentive to develop more housing in general and an opportunity to create affordable housing. Number two, the FLUM, Future Land Use Map, designation for the area of the Danbury Fair Mall is a regional mall, which denotes an area under common management consisting of a single structure wherein a mix of compatible uses are provided, and that is designed with the majority of uses accessible from a common interior concourse. Since this petition seeks to create a zone that fits this general description, it is consistent with the POCD. Number three, the economic development section of the POCD recommends review and update to the city's commercial zoning regulations to ensure that the regulations provide sufficient flexibility to respond to current and future market conditions. Number four, the Plan of Conservation Development, POCD contemplated developing a regional mall mixed-use district, and the proposed amendments do just that and will not negatively impact the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. The motion to give this a positive recommendation was made by Mr. Sylvain, seconded by Mrs. Hofstadter, and passed unanimously by voice vote with 4 ayes from Mr. Chioccio, Mrs. Hofstadter, Mr. Sylvain, and Chairman Finaldi. So let me go to Westcog 8.3B recommendation. And before I do that, for Commissioner Melillo and for Commissioner Jowdy, I think the longest members here, have you ever seen anything like this before?
I just about fell out of my chair when the email came through with it attached, Mr. Haddad.
Unbelievable. So when I was in a bad mood about 5 years ago, I said, why do we have to keep reading these things? They got nothing to say. And new regular member Commissioner Bennett today goes, I'm a little surprised they had nothing to say. Little do you know that they've always had nothing to say until tonight. So this is the first for us. So as you know, we email from Ms. Reed is attached. Please find a copy of the above referenced petition. It went to Westcog. Here is their response. And it is dated September 11th, 2023 at 2:09. To Joanne Reed, Planning Assistant, from Christian Folberg, Senior Planner, Connecticut. Statutory referral to Westcog from Danbury, attached zoning amendment dated September 11, 2023. Thank you for submitting the attached referral to Westcog. The opinion of Westcog staff is that the proposal, while allowing for increased opportunities for reuse of the mall property, is missing several elements that would bring this regional destination into the 21st century. The regional staff have several comments the Commission may wish to consider before moving forward with this proposal. As currently written, the affordable units proposed in a housing incentive option, page 7 through 9, would not count toward the city's affordable housing appeals listing percentage. The proposal is inconsistent with the affordability definitions laid out in the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 830G, as defined in the state statute 7. Median income means, after adjustments for family size, the lesser of the state median income or the area median income for the area in which the municipality containing the affordable housing development is located, as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Any affordable housing units created under this proposed amendment would not count toward Danbury's total in the affordable housing appeals listing, because the state median income is currently and likely to continue to be the lesser of the state or area median incomes. See Connecticut General Statutes 8-30GK for developments that qualify to be counted towards the appeal listing. Other municipalities in the region require 10 to 30% of the entire residential development to be affordable if permitting a density bonus. As currently written, 124 units can be built without any affordability requirement for a 100-acre minimum site. If using the density bonus, up to 174 units can be built with only half of the difference required to be affordable, 25 units or 14% of the entire development. Written this way, the proposal would require anywhere from 0.8% up to a maximum of 14% to be affordable over the 124 unit density limit. This area is served by public transit, sewers, and is in close proximity to job centers, making it an excellent location for increased affordable housing. The existing site is nearly 100% covered by directly connected impervious surfaces, and the local drainage basin has some of the highest coverages in the Western Connecticut region. Page 36, Westcog POCD. Increased frequency and intensity of flooding events will continue to impact the surrounding infrastructure and water quality that can cause harm to the regional and local populations. Any new building development and or repaving or reconstruction of parking should incorporate green infrastructure and flood management techniques to curb these impacts. So I'm going to have Ms. Calitro do her staff report. She's also going to comment on this. And additionally, I want to throw into the mix that the last paragraph of the last sentence of the first paragraph, where it says, the regional staff have several comments the commission may wish to consider before moving forward with this proposal. So we checked today to see, since we've never had one of these before. As you know, any recommendation from the Planning Commission does change the vote requirement here. It does not, as it does on the 8.3a, it does not on the 8.3b. So this does not have any way to influence our vote. So I'm now going to call Ms. Calitro to comment on that and or her staff report in any order that she chooses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
For the record, Sharon Calitro, I'm the planning director. I guess let me just comment on Westcog's report, since you've just read it into the record and my report is pretty lengthy. While we appreciate obviously the comments from Westcog under the statutes 8-3B, and he's right, it doesn't change anything relative to voting. It has been our experience with the State Department of Housing that units that are constructed pursuant to these provisions that are proposed in this regulation, which basically mirror the housing incentive option, which are already in our regulations in section 4B7, I believe, do count on the list. And again, without going into the weeds on which statutes and how and what the definitions are, the housing incentive options, which are mirrored here, are defined in 8-2G and 8-39A, and they're again mirrored in this new proposal. And as written in our regulations, subject to deed restrictions on the income limitations for 40 years, they have been counted by the State Department of Housing and confirmed to be able to be counted by the State Department of Housing. So with respect to that, it's just it's their viewpoint in relation to the 830G statute. And with respect to the drainage, I think there's enough flexibility and room in consideration of any additional site plan approval, should we get to that, in a new building that may be constructed on a site in the MIRM district. And I'm calling it the MIRM. It's a mixed use regional mall. We just shortened it up and called it the MIRM. As during the site plan review process, that we could incorporate any LID low impact development techniques as part of that review, and or make it a requirement. The paving or reconstruction of existing parking is just, if they need to restripe the parking area for one reason or another, it wouldn't necessarily trip anything. But I think there's room enough in our regulations and in course of an engineering department review that we could incorporate some new techniques if need be. Without a doubt, if there's a new pad that were to be proposed, like Shake Shack or Longhorn, that's not a reconstruction or just a repaving of what's there. That you would take that whole area into consideration with parking and landscaping. So I think that those are my comments on Westcog's comments. Okay, so with respect to my staff report, you all have a copy of it. It's dated August 30th, 2023. It's part of the record. I am not going to read it verbatim because it's 5 pages in length, but I'm going to try to skim through it. Again, this is a petition to amend the zoning regulations, section 2B and 3F2. So there are amendments to those 2 sections, and to add new sections 5I and 8E4A, which includes the mixed-use regional mall zoning district and some associated amendments. So the sections 2B definitions and 3F2, which are the use regulations for special permit uses, cafes, taverns, grocery stores, etc., were included to number 1, define a new use, which is entitled a brew pub in the city of Danbury. We don't have that use, and as you know, if the use isn't specifically allowed, it's prohibited in the zoning regulations. So the proposal is to add a new brew pub use with the definition, and then to amend section 3F2 to add it to all the rest of the uses that that include service of alcoholic beverages. The reason, and then again, the 5I and 8E4A are the new, relate to the new zoning district and sign regulations pursuant thereto. So the reasons why the petition should be granted are outlined in a letter from Attorney Beecher dated August 11, 2023. You all have a copy of that. Again, we have no objection to the addition of the brew pub use to the to section 2B, nor the amendments to 3F2. As you might be aware, a brew pub is a common use nowadays in many municipal zoning regulations. The way it's proposed to be defined is basically a restaurant use with a portion of the facility that in which you can manufacture, package, store, and store beer for on and off-site consumption. So basically remains kind of a restaurant use with an accessory use, brewing. The state permit for beer manufacturing is required under the new definition, and the quantities are limited, as you will note. Again, the intent is that the brew pub operates as a restaurant that can manufacture and sell beer it produces. This is not a brewery. A brewery is a different use, differently defined in the zoning regulations allowed in the IL40 zoning district. So we don't have any objections or any further comments on those 2 parts of the petition. So let me just focus on the creation of the MIRM district regulations. So this is a new zone intended to address specific redevelopment issues associated with large regional mall commercial centers with a configuration oriented predominantly inward, and in which a majority of the tenants have access from an internal pedestrian concourse. And in Danbury, that description definitely describes the area and the structures of the Danbury Fair Mall. The mall site was recognized in the 2023 Plan of Conservation and Development as an economic driver for the city. Its regional significance, its taxpayer status, its unique physical characteristics, and the environment in which it exists set it apart from our other general, arterial, limited, light, and neighborhood commercial districts and areas in the city. And sustaining the mall requires a focus on the regulatory scheme, on flexibility in the regulations, and on a clear regulatory process to allow for anticipated changes. Creating the new district. So the petition seeks to create the new district and promulgate specific regulations, including sign regulations, which I'll get into. The action of the zoning commission is to determine if the new district is warranted, consistent with the land use plan for the future, and in particular in this area, whether the text aligns with the city's zoning scheme or existing regulations, and if creating this new district is in the city's best interest. It is not, this petition is not at this time a rezoning request for the Danbury Fair Mall property. If this petition is approved and the regulations are amended to include this new district, one would assume that the mall would petition the zoning commission to rezone their property. That's a different process, another public hearing, very specific relative to them. The focus here should be on the regulations of the new zone, including the uses, the list of uses that are permitted by special exception or special permit, how those uses will be regulated, and in particular, regulations governing signage. The new district is intended to address, again, the sign regulations are intended to address specific sign concerns relative to the new district and the large structures of the district. So let me just walk you through the sections of the 5I, which are the proposed new regulations, and Attorney Beecher will do the same. So I'll kind of skim over mine. And again, you have my complete staff report, which is in the record. So 5I 1 through 3 provides the purpose and intent of the district, describes which properties are eligible to apply and the conditions of the use. There are standards for ownership and minimum lot size, the requirement that it be served by utilities, and the ability to add residential use within an existing building, and then some requirements relative to access and location. It would be specific to large parcels that are designed to be designed and operated as a regional mixed-use mall. The conditions on use standards and those in 5I2 appear to staff to be reasonable. The residential use noted in 5I3C is only being proposed to be permitted within the existing, within the existing footprint of a building that's 75,000 square feet or larger. So a new freestanding building on a site in this district could not house, well, that's a bad term, could not be used for residential purposes. So the residential use could only be as part of the structure that already exists, and part of a large structure that already exists. And then subject to approvals process, all other proposed uses would be permitted in new freestanding structures. Restaurants, new retail could be in outbuildings, but not residential use. Section 5I4 contains a list of uses in the new MERM district. And again, that organizational format aligns with our zoning regulations. And in terms of those uses, the permitted, special exception, special permit, the majority of those uses actually mirror what's already in the CG20 zone. And if you want to compare and use the mall site, that site is or in the CG20 zoning district. So the uses per se, should the mall property be rezoned, are not going to be new. The majority of them are not new. There are a couple of new uses. For instance, an art gallery is called out and a conference center. But there are also uses that are in the CG20 zone that are omitted from this new MERM zoning district. So one could say that it's more restrictive, and those uses have to do with funeral homes, crematories, a firehouse, construction, monument or building material sales, and under construction related uses, and motor vehicle sales and repair uses. In general, the uses are intended to provide for a mix of commercial uses, including retail and entertainment, limited residential, generally within one structure or on the mall property. The two notable uses that are proposed to be allowed in the zone that are not allowed in the CG20 zone today are an apartment house or a garden apartment. Again, they would have to be, those residential uses would have to be established within an existing structure. There's a density limitation. There's a requirement of the majority of the square footage of the main building to remain non-residential. And there is also an opportunity, as we discussed earlier, relative to the WestCog, to provide some deed restricted affordable housing, should that option be exercised. Section 5I5 provides the general use regulations, and for the most part, most of them mirror what's allowed in the CG20 zone. The building height, however, is proposed in this new zone to be 75 feet. That's 30 feet taller than the existing CG20 zoning maximum height of 45 feet. 75 feet is a building height that is allowed in the P&D zoning district, as well as the RH3 zone for apartment houses, as well as within the CBD zone outside of the Main Street Historic District. Our concern relative to the proposed height, as one might imagine, is that at least a portion of the Danbury Mall property to which this district could apply is the airport protection zone, kind of crisscross over that property. So we discussed with the petitioner while they were drafting these regulations that we suggested that we speak with the airport administrator and try to collaborate on some language relative to the requirements associated with redevelopment of land that would fall in the zone and also under the airport protection zones. And that language, which he has signed off on, is presented in section 5I, 5B, 1 through 5. And it's also important because we need to be sure that petition applicants are aware that, hey, you're in the airport protection zone, these other things apply. It gives us the ability, provides the ability of the reviewing agency or department the ability to condition or make recommendations on redevelopment if a site plan comes through. And we really wanted to confirm, and that's why there was some time taken in relation to discussing this height, that a 75-foot was actually a feasible height limit. And you wouldn't want to approve a zone that had a maximum site limit that they couldn't possibly get to in this specific location. So they did some background work before we came up to it, and everyone was comfortable with the conditions and the requirements as outlined in the proposed regulations. Section 5I5C allows the department to waive the review process for a change in any allowed use in the existing large structure, except for a change from commercial to residential or a change that results in the use being classified a trip generator. This is appropriate and is similar to the redevelopment project going on, a redevelopment process, established for large structures in the P&D. In other words, you could change out permitted uses in the building without having to go through a whole approval process per se, except if you wanted to change commercial to residential. You had a commercial building and now you want to be residential. Yes, you have to go through the regular approval process, including some commissions. And or if that new use generated traffic to an amount that you became a trip generator. So that isn't being proposed to be waived. So that's a good thing. Section 5I6 provides use regulations for specific permitted and special exception uses. So in terms of the apartment and garden apartment density, it's proposed at 1 unit per 35,000 gross square feet. 35,000 square feet of gross site area. So based on a minimum site size of 100 acres, that density could result in 124 dwelling units on the site. This is a section that also provides that the gross building area shall not be less than 93% of the gross building acreage at the time of approval of the rezoning of the MIRM to the MIRM district. And this regulation helps ensure that the regional center remains predominantly non-residential. So we're letting a little, the proposal is to let a little residential use in, but it's still going to remain predominantly a non-residential use. Section 4 requires the minimum open space per unit at 500 square feet. That is the same requirement that's allowed in, that's required in the other zones. And in this particular case, the proposed language does, however, include some additional opportunities to meet the 500 square foot requirement. For instance, if you have a building with all this interior concourses, and I think we all know that people go there when the stores are closed and use the concourse as kind of a recreational area. So in this particular zone, we're going to say you're allowed to include that in meeting the 500 square foot requirement, because that's actually how it operates today. Okay, and then contrary to the other sections of the zoning regulations in subsection C, the trip generation in other circumstances in the regulations is cumulative, In other words, you add up all the trip generation of all the uses, and if you're over 500 trips per day, you become a trip generator. So in subsection C of the proposed regulations, it provides that under certain circumstances, trip generation for new uses in the existing building would be calculated individually and not cumulatively. Cumulatively, on a 1.2 million square foot, for instance, Danbury Fair Mall building, would mean every time it's basically a trip generator. So we just thought in terms of relieving the process and not burdening all the departments and the commissions, that those things would just be treated individually and not cumulatively in terms of traffic generation. And we thought that was appropriate. Specific use regulations for daycare centers and schools in this section mirror the other zones. Section 5I7 includes specific use regulations under 2 special exception uses and circumstances. First, if any use in a proposed in a new freestanding building or in addition to an existing building, that's considered a special exception. Let's say they want to convert an old retail store into housing, special exception. Again, the trip generator would just be, you would just determine trip generation based on that use and not the entire site. Secondly, the MIRM district, again, as we talked about with the WestCog recommendations, includes the housing incentive option that would allow for a density increase. However, a portion of the units above that which you would be allowed under the 1 per 35,000 would be required to be deed restricted. So you would drop the density to 1 per to 25,000, and then half of that would be required to be deed restricted. That's exactly the same as how it operates today in the RMF 4 and 6 zones. In other words, 1 per 4,000, 1 per 6,000. But if you wanted to go under the option, you could reduce that to, I think it's 1 per 4. In the 6, you go to 4, and in the 4, you go to 3. And then whatever the density bump is, half of those have to be deed restricted as affordable. Again, let me go on the record, those units have been counted for us by the state on the 830G list. So that option is a tool that helps create affordable housing, and we believe to be a benefit for the city. Section 5I8 establishes additional use regulations relative to parking and loading in the MIRM district. And while parking and loading requirements of 8C would generally apply if there's an exception for sites that have more than 4,000 parking spaces. And so that requirement for parking, the 1 per 150 of retail would go to 1 per 250. To retail, except for hotels and restaurants, which would be calculated at the same rate that exists under 8-C. And for large buildings, the proposal is not to require, again, this is the proposed language, it wouldn't require any additional loading spaces. However, there would have to be some confirmation of what the loading exists on the site at the time you rezone it to a MIRM. So we kind of sort of set the floor, and then you couldn't change loading spaces to retail spaces. You couldn't make any changes without necessarily going back to for a review, except for I should say you wouldn't. It would allow non-conforming parking to remain as is with respect to landscaping, irrespective of the paving and reconstruction. And again, that was referred to in WestCog. And let me reiterate, these new requirements that are proposed would not apply if you're a new freestanding proposed use and you required new parking. Again, new Shake Shack, new Longhorn on the other side of the site, in the corner of the Macy's parking lot. Same regulations we have today. Nothing gets waived. Section 5I9 provides that signs shall comply to 8E except for large sites with structures of over 1 million square feet in size. And under this latter scenario for the big buildings. The new sign regulations are proposed in 8E4A for the Murn zoning district. I could tell you that the Danbury Mall site to which this could apply has 12 variances since 1984, and all but 2 of them had to do with sign regulations, which is evidence that our sign regulations in a general commercial sense don't necessarily address the signage objectives of a structure that's over a million square feet in size. So they made some changes to that, and the new sign section was crafted to address those, and in most cases they render those variances moot. And in particular, under the new zone, the amount of signage on the exterior walls of the regional center will be allowed to increase. New regulations are proposed for freestanding signs, including allowances for a sign to be partially digital. Again, in the case of the Danbury Mall site, several of the signs within each category, there are also proposed to be new tenant freestanding signs. So there's wall signs, freestanding signs, and tenant signs. And in the case of the mall, several of the signs within each of those categories already exist. So if you're trying to picture, is this applied to the mall? Am I going to get double the amount of the signage? That's not the case. They would just be covered under this new proposed language. We discussed the sign section with the zoning enforcement officer at length during the development of these regulations. On behalf of the applicant, we don't have any objection to the proposed regulations as they're drafted. We do note that we recommended that they be sent to the airport administrator for review relative to the digital displays. And I'll let Attorney Beecher address his kind of proposed minor amendments to the regulations to address this. But let me just say that there's some additional language proposed in the section on digital signs for signs that are proposed in the airport protection zones that basically give us some additional authority, review requirements, and the ability to condition and or change some signs, digital signs that may, after they're up and operating, as you can imagine, because you don't really know that there's necessarily a problem till some pilot says, the green's too green or the white's too white or it's blinking too often or something. So they added some language which gives us the ability to control that even after it's up and operating. So those changes, and he'll walk you through those, we believe are a good thing. And then in terms of consistency with the plan of conservation and development, the future land use map within the POCD represents Danbury's preference for land use based on all the discussions and information garnered during the planning process. It's a guide for policy decisions, and the FLUM designation is a reference to consider when you're contemplating new regulations. The area for the mall property in the 2023 POCD was listed as a regional mall in recognition of the role of the regional commercial center and its uniqueness of its design and operation. The designation notes an area under common management consisting of a single structure wherein a mix of compatible uses are provided, and that's designed and oriented with a majority of the uses accessible from an interior concourse. There's a different layout than a common strip center, and the mix of uses are contemplated within the regional mall area, and there's shared parking with outbuildings and surrounding structures. As this petition seeks to create a zone that fits the general description, which I just went through with you in the FLUM, the commission may reasonably conclude that the petition is consistent with the POCD. In terms of 2 sections of the POCD, review and updates to the city's commercial zoning district regulations was recommended in strategy 6 of the economic development section to ensure the regulations provide sufficient flexibility to respond to current and future market conditions. The action or step as part of the strategy includes consideration of a new district, and several uses were recommended. And while housing in particular was not specifically noted in this section of the plan, it was not specifically prohibited. So other uses that are proposed in the new zone are included in the list that's noted in the POCD. Therefore, the commissions may reasonably conclude that the new zone and the uses contained therein is consistent with this strategy and action. And then in terms of housing, the proposed amendments introduce a housing component, hence the mixed use nomenclature, right? Density is limited and the use is confined to an existing building or in addition to an existing building. And as previously noted, density can only increase the density under a housing incentive option as some of the additional units are deed restricted as affordable. The POCD and the Affordable Housing Plan recommend exploring these opportunities to create affordable housing, and this petition provides an incentive to do that. Therefore, in terms of the consistency with the housing component of the POCD and the AHP, which is the Affordable Housing Plan, again, the commissions could reasonably conclude the petition is consistent. And in conclusion, I just want to note, as also noted by Attorney Beecher, the proposed regulations for the new district were developed collaboratively with the petitioner. And in doing so, we strive, myself and our staff and the various departments, to protect the city's best interests in terms of opportunities for growth while balancing the objectives of the petitioner. The amendments are written in a format that we deem consistent with our existing zoning regulations and have been vetted by several departments. Administrative and other review processes are outlined and mandated where appropriate. Signage and parking regulations address unique circumstances associated with a mixed-use regional mall commercial center, not unlike mixed-use regional commercial centers in Connecticut and throughout the country. And finally, the POCD contemplated developing a regional mall mixed-use district, and that's what these amendments do. Therefore, we don't object to this petition. Again, the commission needs to determine if the uses, the regulations, and the restrictions are appropriate, and if they do the same. And I'll let Attorney Beecher walk through again in his presentation his minor amendments, which we don't object to, nor do we think substantively change any portion of this petition.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Commission members, questions. Commissioner Malillo.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Cletro. I have a question, not on your staff report, but just a procedural question. I just want to make sure we get clarified and on the record, because as you know, we are very unaccustomed to seeing an A3B from Westcog. So I just want to clarify, because normally the staff report, a planning commission recommendation, their public record, the staff report's public record before the planning commission meeting. The planning commission is a live meeting. Their report, their letter is on public record. The Westcog recommendation, the link wasn't activated on the agenda. So while it was read tonight, that was really like the first time the public had access to it. Are we safe tonight if we choose to close the public hearing, or would that need to be kept open because the public would not have necessarily have had enough time to review that recommendation?
Well, it was read into the record. It's open. I mean, it's part of the public record. We didn't get it till after we posted the agenda, really without any time to repost everything. We've talked about it, discussed it at length. It's only a recommendation. It doesn't change. Again, it doesn't change the vote. There's a statutory requirement that we send it under 8-3B. And it just says they shall submit a report back, which they did. So unless Attorney Beecher can comment relative kind of to the legality, any other legal issues, I think we've read it into the record. We've discussed it at length. I'm comfortable with it being that we're protected under that.
Okay, I would just wanted to just to get on the record for the comfort level, because like I said, we're so unused to it, and sometimes the little nuances, like I can think of one where a petition wasn't stamped into the town clerk's office. It was only stamped into the zoning commission's office, as being an issue. So I just wanted to make sure in regards to public access, we were okay.
I think we're okay. We've discussed it pretty much at length. I've had follow-up conversations with them. I can tell you in practice what the State Department of Housing, the highest officials of the State Department of Housing who deal with the appeals list have said to me relative to units that are described like this and whether they're counted or not. And in our experience with the state officials, they've counted them. We've added them to the list under the housing incentive option. So I'm not concerned about it.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calitro. Thank you, Ms. Haddad. I just wanted to get staff comment on the record for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for raising the issue. Commission members, any other questions of Ms. Calitro at this time on any of the issues? Commission members, don't see or hear. Thank you. Anyone wishing to
Yes.
speak in favor?
Hello.
Commissioner Botello, go ahead. Comment?
Yes, I just would like some clarification
Sure.
from Sharon, as far as the regulation, as far as what we're going to be proposing for the residential side. If I correct me wrong, but you said you're going to have 500 square foot units. They're going to be 1-bedroom units.
No.
Okay, so please
The
clarify.
500 square foot, the petition proposes the requirement that each unit, that there be 500 square foot of open space, usable open space per unit. And that 500 square is the same as it's required kind of across the board in the other zoning districts. The difference here, Attorney Beecher can get into it in more detail, but the difference here is the existing zoning regulations tell you what you get to count as part of the 500. And because of the kind of the uniqueness of this proposed zone and the buildings that would be part of that zone, there are some other allowances proposed to get to the 500, but the 500 is 500.
All right, is there any?
Nothing to do with unit size, nothing
Right.
to do with unit size.
Is there any regulation on unit size and whether they're going
No.
to be 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, or they could be?
Actually, I shouldn't say that. Hold on one second. Attorney Beecher can answer you specific questions, but yes, there are, I think they are actually. Yeah, dwelling units, if you go to 5I6A1, dwelling units may include efficiency, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. There shall be no 3 bedroom or more units. 2 bedrooms are limited to a maximum of 20% of the dwelling units.
Okay,
So yeah, there are some restrictions.
okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you. Anything else, commission members? Ms. Calitro. So let me call on now. I'm sorry, Ms. Hylinski, did you have your hand raised? No, okay. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition, Attorney Beecher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name's Tom Beecher from the Collins Hannafin Law Firm, and I represent Danbury Mall LLC and its parent company, the Macerich Company. With me tonight are Tawny Farmer, who's VP of Development for Macerich Company, Maura Ruby, who's the General Manager of the Danbury Fair Mall, and Jamie Walbert, who's a Manager of Development for Macerich Company. Let me just start by saying the obvious. We agree with Sharon's report and what she has detailed very nicely in that report. I do want to address the driving forces from my client's perspective for this proposed regulation and add a little bit more to what Sharon nicely laid out. And obviously, I'm going to repeat some of the things that she's said. The Danbury Fair Mall opened in the mid-1980s. The mall has been a regional destination for nearly 40 years. The Danbury Mall site is over 116 acres. The main commercial center building consists of almost 1.3 million square feet of gross leasable area. The Lord & Taylor anchor store is approximately 80,000 square feet. Unfortunately, that has been vacant since 2020. That's no small problem. That space is a single domino at the moment. No one here wants to see multiple dominoes fall with respect to the mall. A lot has changed since the mid-'80s when the mall opened. We all know that. More importantly, a lot has changed for malls over the last 10 years. There's no denying that online shopping has taken its toll on large malls all across the country and here in Connecticut. There have been many recent articles in national as well as Connecticut publications and newspapers about the challenges facing malls and large commercial shopping centers. One business article noted that the average national vacancy rate for malls nearly doubled from 2018 to the end of the third quarter of last year. Recent articles in the Danbury News Times have reported on these vacancies and these challenges and/or the downward spirals of several malls in Connecticut, including the Enfield Mall, Crystal Mall in Waterford, the Meriden Mall, and the Waterbury Brass Mill Mall. Enfield was 57% vacant. That mall was sold at auction. Crystal Mall in Waterford recently went through foreclosure and was 35% vacant. Meriden was hovering around 50% vacancy. The Waterbury Brass Mill Center, which at 1.1 million square feet is close in size to the Danbury Fair Mall, that mall has lost 2 of its anchor stores. These and other mall properties are potential commercial retail brownfields of the 21st century. If everyone doesn't work together to position mall properties to survive and thrive. The time's now to do something about it and be proactive. The Danbury Fair Mall has been proactive over the years, beginning with transforming the Filene's anchor store into a number of tenant spaces filled by Dick's Sporting Goods, the Cheesecake Factory, Brio, which is now the Barbari's Grill, LL Bean and Forever 21, which is now going to be Round One. The mall has gone beyond the conventional total retail focus of 20 years ago and has worked with the city and potential tenants to expand mall offerings. The mall has introduced new restaurants such as the Longhorn Steakhouse and the Shake Shack that were referenced. It's welcomed entertainment uses such as the Golf Lounge 18 and Round One Entertainment and Bowling. And on the retail front, fortunately, the Target is going to take over the Sears anchor location and open in the near future. The Danbury Mall is attractive. Danbury, the city of Danbury, is attractive. And this mall, unlike others in Connecticut, has a large regional geographic draw. But please don't conclude that this success is great and therefore there's no need for any change. Resting on success and not planning for the future is a recipe for disaster. The Danbury Mall and malls generally must evolve to remain vibrant regional centers. And with municipal help such as yours, they must be able to be flexible and react quickly to potential new tenants. The Danbury Fair Mall is the largest taxpayer in the city of Danbury. This is an important fact because it highlights why both the mall and the city already have acted and should continue to act jointly and proactively to ensure that the property remains vibrant and sustainable as a commercial center for years to come. Maintaining all of the jobs available at the mall is a very important factor woven into that as well. As I said in my letter, the alternative to proactively positioning the mall to succeed is a story all too common in Connecticut and elsewhere. As I said, some malls suffer from shuttered anchor stores, empty parking lots, deferred maintenance, or are already exhibiting exterior deterioration. The current and long-term goal is to make the Danbury Fair Mall a continued regional destination with a variety of offerings for all ages. As you all know, a lot of work is involved in preparing, refining, and ultimately adopting the plan of conservation and development. During the most recent process, Sharon and the planning and zoning staff organized countless meetings and secured input from many stakeholders, agencies, city officials, and taxpayers. That feedback included gathering information from my clients and from others who had concerns about the future of the mall. The Economic Development Goal Strategies and Actions section of the Plan of Conservation and Development includes strategy number 6. Strategy number 6 states, quote, review and update as appropriate, the city's commercial zone regulations to ensure the regulations provide sufficient flexibility to allow development that responds to current and future market conditions, unquote. These proposed mixed-use regional mall district regulations are exactly what strategy number 6 contemplates. We propose this new zone change for large commercial centers that allows flexibility and is designed to respond to current and future market conditions for such properties, and specifically the Danbury Fair Mall. The Economic Development Goal chart for strategy number 6 rates the priority of strategy number 6 as high and directs the Planning and Zoning Department to work with this commission to, quote, consider new zoning options, including the creation of a new mixed-use districts to ensure long-term economic stability and viability of commercial areas. This is critical language. Again, this MIRM zone proposal is consistent with this directive. And as the priority language suggested, the planning director, in fact, has worked collaboratively with us to put together this proposed amendment to present to you. The future land use planning section of the POCD recognizes the regional mall land use designation or zone, and the mall is specifically designated separately on the future land use map. The proposed MIRM regulation proposal is the culmination of extensive discussions between myself, my clients, and the planning director and her staff over the last 2 years. As Sharon and I have both said, it has been a collaborative effort to achieve the goals stated in the POCD, achieve a balance of mixed uses, and adhere to the mutual goal of maintaining a primarily commercial retail property. One of the reasons for and purposes for the new zone is that it applies to an existing, extensively developed, large site with an existing large commercial center building. Part of the discussions that I had with Sharon over the last 2 years included the fact that it made sense for us to wait until after the POCD had been adopted. I just want to say that we commend the director and the planning commission and the staff and all of those involved in looking at the regional mall as an important part of the POCD going forward for the next decade. Let me talk about the MIRM regulations itself. The MIRM regulation only applies to properties with a minimum site size of 100 acres, must be served by municipal sewer and water, must have direct access to an arterial or collector street, and be within 1/2 mile of a limited access highway or connector. These proposed regulations will allow a qualifying property, such as the mall, to include a variety of uses. As Sharon pointed out, the primary uses are pretty much the same as from the CG20 zone. The addition of the brew pub use was a collaborative addition. Again, this is an example of looking for an additional good use beyond pure retail. As Sharon pointed out, we deliberately agreed to leave out certain CG20 uses, such as automobile sales and repair, funeral homes, cannabis facilities, and the sale or repair of construction equipment, to name a few. And like she said, we did add a few from other zones, such as the art gallery and the conference center. Section 5I2A recognizes that lots zoned in the MIRM district are distinctly different than general arterial, limited, light, and neighborhood commercial districts and the downtown business district in terms of ownership, management, design, location, and regional impact. These proposed regulations are distinctly and deliberately different from the regulations governing the other commercial zones in Danbury, because the sites contemplated, and picture the mall, is a site that's completely different than locations in other districts and under the other district regulations. These proposed regulations allow for a streamlined process in certain instances, which is important when a potential tenant is available, but that tenant's unwilling to wait a long time for necessary approvals. As you know, the PND zone also includes a streamlined process. Typically, special exceptions are required for new projects to allow the Planning Commission to assess site layouts, parking plans, and traffic impacts. Because of the extensive pre-existing nature of the mall or other qualifying sites, changing uses in and out of existing space in an existing large building will not have any significant impact on parking, traffic, or the site layout. However, these regulations specifically state that a special exception is required for any uses in a proposed new building or a new addition to an existing building. It is important to note that the Planning Commission unanimously endorsed these regulations, which includes these provisions with respect to special exceptions. Now, the special permit uses, which this commission reviews, remain unchanged, except that we've added the group up. Certain exceptions set forth in the regulations are due to the fact that the existing mall site or qualifying site consists of a large pre-existing, extensively developed site with a very large pre-existing commercial center. Much like the differing treatment for uses in the PND zone, the unique characteristics of the mall site warrant some differing treatment under the zoning regulations as mentioned in the POCD. As stated in the purposes and intent section of these regulations, the regulations are designed to, quote, accommodate the unique design and location of an existing large regional commercial center and facilitate its sustainable redevelopment, reuse, and expansion, unquote. For instance, the exception to the landscaping requirements for the existing mall parking lot, which covers 56 acres, is consistent with its status as a pre-existing non-conforming element of the site, consistent with proper stormwater management, and consistent with the logistics of plowing, sanding, and sweeping large parking areas. There's a history of many variances granted for the mall site since the 1980s, as Sharon mentioned. And these regulations will obviate the need for potential additional variances related to parking and landscaping and other aspects of this site. I would note that for any new pad sites, as Sharon also mentioned, such as for Longhorns and Shake Shack, the current landscaping requirements apply to those sites, and they will continue to apply to any new construction sites. The height regulations are the result of the discussions with the planning director and staff and the Danbury Airport administrator. As I stated in my letter, the mall sought and secured pre-application approval from the FAA for the 75-foot height limit at the Lord and Taylor site. We all thought this was an important reviewing this height provision. For context for you, the east end of the Macy's anchor store is over 62 feet in height. I would note, Sharon did, that the RH3, CBD, and PND zones all allow a 75-foot height limit. The changes within this regulation pertaining to height within the airport zone have actually added additional oversight provisions for within the airport zone. In other words, there are additional protections for construction within the airport zone from the city of Danbury's perspective. There's a proposed new sign regulation that would apply to the mall signage. This proposal is the result of an analysis of the existing signs on the site, the history of many sign variances granted over the years for signs, and consideration of the appropriate signage for a site consisting of at least 100 acres with a building of over 1 million square feet on it. Over 90% of the mall tenants are interior facing tenants, meaning they do not get and exterior sign exposure because they cannot comply with the current sign regulations, which only allows a tenant wall sign to be on the outer wall of the tenant's exact specific space. Tenants in strip malls and shopping centers have a distinct advantage there because almost all those tenants are in storefronts and therefore are entitled to have wall signs. Again, because these types of large properties with large existing commercial center structures are so unique, we added this provision to the sign section, which is applicable only to a site with a structure of over 1 million square feet. And obviously the idea there is that because they're all interior facing, or the majority of the tenants are. With respect to parking, the mall has extensive parking. As identified in the final site plan filed for round 1 application, which was approved after the target application, and therefore the round 1 application is the more recent. The mall has 6,475 parking spaces, including the Shake Shack and Longhorn sites. The proposed amendments allow a site with over 4,000 existing parking spaces to use a formula of 1 parking space for 250 square feet for all non-residential uses. For residential uses and for hotels and restaurants located in a new building, such as Shake Shack or Longhorns, the normal existing parking formulas would apply. I also want to note that we did file a revised draft set of regulations after having discussions with the planning director. And as I said in my cover letter that I sent in with those revisions, those are relatively minor. We added church and other place of worship for the reasons stated in my letter. And while prior to filing this petition, we had discussions and the input was sought from the airport administrator, Mike Safranek. Mike took another look at the sign regulations after we had filed and had some additional comments. And after reviewing those comments, we added some language to section 5A, 5I, 5B, just for some additional protections, as Sharon pointed out, with respect to the digital signs. And by the way, she used the phrase, the signs might blink too much. They're not allowed to blink. No blinking, no flashing. They can only change once every 30 seconds, which I think an airplane coming in over Southern Boulevard, coming down over Lee Farm is going to land before that sign has a chance to change. Or if it changes, they'll only see it once. In any event, those were the changes we made since we submitted. As I said, with respect to these regulations, the mall site and any qualifying site is unique due to the sheer magnitude of the site, the size and magnitude of the main commercial building, and its regional pull and impact. Therefore, a different set of regulations applying to such a property is both warranted and prudent. With respect to the apartments, these proposed regulations allow apartments on a MIRM site. Apartments are confined to an existing building that is at least 75,000 square feet or larger. Apartments cannot be located in any new building on site. This housing provision not only assists with allowing additional housing opportunities in the city of Danbury, but also allows for the adaptive reuse of a section of an existing building, such as the Lord and Taylor anchor site. Pursuant to this regulation, residential units are limited to no more than 1 unit per 35,000 square feet of land area. For the mall site, which is 116 acres, a maximum of 144 units would be permitted. The mathematical yield pursuant to this regulation is just 1.2 apartments per acre. Sharon's example was based on a 100-acre site. That yields 124 apartments. So it's 1.2 apartments per acre. As I said, the apartments are contemplated for the former Lord and Taylor anchor site. Under these regulations, the apartments can be studios, 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units, but 2 bedrooms are limited to no more than 20% of the total apartment units. An important balancing factor here, as Sharon explained to you, is that non-residential uses at a site, such as the mall, must be maintained at no less than 93% of the gross building area in existence when this property is changed to a MIRM site. This means that the regulation very explicitly limits the amount of space that can be dedicated to residential use. Again, this is to achieve flexibility while maintaining a balance of uses, mixed uses, at the mall or any applicable site. Now, other Connecticut communities have adopted zoning regulations similarly to assist the reimagination of malls. For instance, Trumbull adopted a mixed-use design district regulation. And in Trumbull, residential apartments have been approved as part of the rejuvenation of the Trumbull Mall. This proposed regulation requires open space and recreation space of 500 feet, consistent with the current regulations. And Sharon pretty well explained that there are, to some degree, some deviations which are reflective of the type of property that's likely to be in this zone. Now, with respect to the housing incentive option, this is language that mirrors the language in the RMF4 and RMF6 incentive housing zones. This affordable housing provision gives the developer of the apartments the option to secure a density bonus in exchange for deed restricting the units. In exchange for deed restricting some units, they're allowed to build one per 25,000 square feet of land area. And with respect to the additional bonus units, one half have to be deed restricted. With respect to the comments received from Westcog related to this affordable housing option, I would just point out that they were looking at section 8-30G of the statutes, but the housing incentive density bonus language in this proposed regulations and in the RMF4 and RMF6 zones stems from two different affordable housing statutes in the state of Connecticut, 8-2G and 8-39A. There's a definition of median income in 8-39A and a definition of affordable housing. And so, as Sharon pointed out, and I'm just agreeing with her 100%, these units are affordable housing and they will count towards Danbury's total. Otherwise, there's a problem with the RMF4 and the RMF6 language, but I don't believe there is whatsoever. In other words, this language is consistent with those, and they're referring to different statutes, and the review just was looking at the wrong statutes. This proposal to allow limited residential units is consistent with the City of Danbury's 2022 Affordable Housing Plan. That housing plan includes the goals of providing housing opportunities for young adults who are starting off their careers and fulfilling the need for workforce housing. The housing plan notes that Danbury struggles to retain and attract young adults. The MIRM regulation allows studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments that certainly would be attractive to young adults in this particular setting at the mall. Live, play, work. The city also has a goal of providing a variety of differing housing opportunities, generally for all ages. The POCD incorporates the housing goals from the housing plan into the POCD. And so this particular provision, as well as all of these regulations, comply with both the POCD and the 2022 housing plan. Lastly, with respect to the Westcog comments concerning stormwater management, the comments are acknowledged. There are no new buildings proposed at the current time. More importantly, however, the mall has an ongoing program of maintenance of the stormwater management facilities on the site, and these were discussed and reviewed with the city engineer and the planning department during the floodplain and site plan approval process for the Target store. So there's ongoing discussions with the city on these topics. So again, the comments are acknowledged, but the city and the mall work together on those issues. In conclusion, we had many meetings with staff and some that also included the zoning enforcement officer, Sean Harity. As I said, input was sought from Mike Safranek prior to finalizing the proposal that we have submitted to you. I'm pleased that through all of the collaboration, there is an agreement on the specifics of what we have submitted to you. In her report conclusion, Sharon states, quote, "The proposed regulations for the new Murray zoning district were developed collaboratively with the petitioner. Staff arrived and strive to protect the city's best interests in terms of opportunities for growth while balancing the objectives of the petitioner," unquote. This is not a small project, and both my clients and city personnel worked many, many hours over the last 2 years, and everyone was reasonable and pragmatic. The Plan of Conservation and Development recognizes that Danbury Fair Mall is a major employment center. The POCD also recognizes that the mall accounts for 41% of all of the gross retail space in the city of Danbury. 41%. Unfortunately, the simple retail economic fact is that all 1.3 million square feet cannot be maintained as pure retail space forever. Flexibility and a balance of uses are needed. If dominoes fall, jobs will be lost. Clearly, this proposal is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this text amendment. The amendments will not negatively impact health, safety, or welfare of the citizens of Danbury. And as I said, the current and long-term goal is to make the Danbury Fair Mall a continued regional destination with a variety of mixed-use offerings for all ages, a dynamic and vibrant place. We don't want dominoes to irreversibly fall and never be picked back up. For all these reasons, and for the reasons spelled out in Sharon's report, we would ask you to please grant this petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Beecher. Commissioner Malilla, questions of Attorney Beecher at this time?
Yes, thank you, Attorney Beecher. I have 2 questions for you. They may or may not be a little bit more detailed in the response. The first one, I don't know if it's appropriate for you or maybe one of the representatives from the mall. And I'm curious about this in regards to the residential uses. You've talked about the possibility of deed restricting for the affordability purposes. Was there any thought or concern that might regarding maybe a deed restriction for age purposes? I'm thinking in terms of the potential maybe of having teens living in the mall, therefore kind of hanging out in their lobby space.
That topic didn't come up.
The school teacher in me was thinking about that, just knowing what happens sometimes when teens congregate. And I know that sometimes they like to congregate at the mall, but they have to transport to get there. And some people maybe, it's almost like, well, I live here, and so,
Right.
so that's I'm just curious.
When only 20% of the units can be 2-bedroom, I'm picturing that the units are not going to be filled with a lot of teenagers. I think the units being either studios or 1-bedrooms and some possibly 2-bedrooms, they're not going to be fueling the teenagers that may want to be wandering around in the mall that you're picturing.
I'm concerned as though, being a school teacher, I do know of several teenagers who do live in 1-bedroom apartments. They sleep in the bedroom, a parent sleeps on the couch. Unfortunately, the reality of the Danbury community we live in now is not really the Danbury community of 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so again, I just wanted to mention it only because I'm just curious what a potential thought would be. Again, it's not like I'm looking to break anything, but I don't want to be down the road and have something happen and say this could have been projected.
Well, the only thing I can add to what I said before, which is that topic never came up in any of our discussions, either with the city or even internally. But just keep in mind that the mall hours are still the mall hours. So There's no place to wander after the mall closes. I understand there's a couple of facilities that may be open a little later, but those are very limited.
Yeah, like I said, it was just a thought that came to mind. I was curious in regards to that. I wanted to ask for put it out there. The second one, truthful. So I'm also curious regarding item. It's use under the permitted uses is number 26. And I recognize these are most likely copied verbatim from the CG20. Nursery, kindergarten, elementary, or secondary school. Would that be on a new structure, or would that be potentially in what would already be classified you identified as a commercial center?
Well, the way this is written, it could be either, because if it's a new building, I mean, it would have to go to the planning commission, or it could be in the existing building. There have been, nursery school, I forget the name of it now, but there was one, for instance, in the Summit building on the ground floor. So they are a part of large adaptive reuse, mixed use building.
My only concern is from a security standpoint, again, it's a different world than, 12 years ago. 12 years ago was pre-Sandy Hook.
Right.
Things changed. I'm a school teacher, putting on the record. I think we know that. For somebody to get into my school, they have to be let in. I mean, schools are tight security now. Something happens at WestCon, Ellsworth, my building, we go on strict on heightened security procedures. Something happens, at the West Side campus, the Magnet School goes on security campus. Something happens at the hospital, Broadview goes on heightened security standards. If something were to happen in the mall, it could impact to that. And also, I'm thinking about potential registered sex offenders, and it's just things along those. I'm just curious from a school security standpoint in regards to that use.
Well, your concerns are all valid, and I have to tell you that we did take a number of uses that are, the time may come when that may be a use to be explored. There are no current plans whatsoever to have a school use in the mall. So that is, you use the phrase cut and paste. I'd like to think we all substantially looked at it a little bit more than that, but there's no current plans for a school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Malolo, Attorney Beecher. Commissioner Jody, you had a hand up?
Yes, Attorney Beecher, you said a couple times, and I do understand that you don't want to have a domino effect. You don't want to take 10,000, 20, 50,000 square feet, and then now the percentages are going the opposite way. But this commission, and let me just, not that it's a negative approach, but this commission was always concerned about something like we have industrial space and then somebody wants to change it to commercial, and we keep on taking industrial space, and then all of a sudden there's not much industrial space. And it seems like if we keep on taking the residential and put it into changing the zone and so forth, and having restaurants take over the space and so forth, then you're minimizing the retail. And it's a good approach because we could see what's happening, but it's a concern.
Well, my reaction to that, Mr. Jolly, would be that, currently it is zone CG20. And so the change in the zone is for a variety of reasons that apply particularly to a site like this with a building like this. But you're really adopting many of the same uses. In other words, you can have a restaurant in a CG20. You can have some of the other uses in the CG20. So those roll over to here. Yes, 7% of the existing square footage could be residential. So that's one change. But the rest of the uses are pretty much consistent. So it's not a change from IL40 to RA20, for instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jody. Thank you, Attorney Beecher. Commissioner Hylinski, please.
Has anything been talked about as far as prices for the residential units? Is it too early to ask?
Unless someone has that information, I haven't heard that because it is kind of early because we're at the regulation stage. So the people that may be interested in building there are watching carefully, but I don't have pricing from them just yet, because obviously there's some retrofitting costs involved. So that's a long-winded answer. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hylinski and Attorney Beecher. Anything else, commission members? Any questions at this time? Commission members at this time. So let me ask if I could. Oh, I see Commissioner Bennett. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, my question would be for the present tenants. What I understand and what I hear about the mall and why there's such a changeover of ownership in space is, of course, the Amazon theory, but more importantly is the rent theory. What I've heard about the Danbury Mall, and I'm in there all the time, I've been around here for a long time, is that the rent is too high. So you're gonna do, or you're not gonna do, but somebody's gonna invest a lot of money to build more resources within the mall. And what are you gonna do for the tenants that are there? Are they gonna get a rate cut in their rent, or is that gonna remain the same?
Well, I could turn it over to Maura Ruby, I guess, on the rents. But let me just say that these regulations will actually give tenants more exposure. And if you keep it filled, and if you have additional people filling, literally, the Lord and Taylor space, that all makes for a much more vibrant, productive place, and therefore, hopefully, higher incomes for the individual tenants, as well as the exposure with signage.
Well, I can understand that, and I know that's some of the reason why they're even doing that. But still, it doesn't. I hope you're right when you say that it's going to bring more business into the mall, because you know what? There's some hardworking people there that need that bump. My fear is if the rents stay the same and or possibly go up, because the expense to run that new building will go up. So who's going to eat that? Who's going to take care of that increased rent or expense? I'm sorry, not rent, expense. Is it going to remain the same? That would be my question. You don't have to answer that now. It's something that I would like at some point to get an answer to. I think that's huge. Well, how do you keep the people there?
Well, I don't know if Maura or Tawny want to take a crack at that.
Well, are you asking who's going to maintain the apartments and who's going to
Nope.
handle the costs for maintaining the apartments?
No, I'm talking about the current retail stores that are in the mall right now. There's a couple of new ones coming in. There's a couple that are going out. And, you know, I'm sure it's a business and volume of business and profit. But what I've heard about not only your mall, but other malls, that the rents are just climbing out of sight and nobody can stay there. So as you start building this increased opportunity for the business owner, what happens to the rent? Are you going to need to increase the rent to do what you're doing?
No. The residential developer would handle all the costs for that residential development. It would have nothing to do with the mall tenants at all. Every single tenant in the mall, each rent is separately negotiated. It's not like we have a per square footage rent. Depends on the sales of the tenant, the type of tenant. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it. You know, local tenants typically pay less than national tenants. I mean, there's just so many factors that go into it that, you know, we can't really comment on how it's going to go up or down based on the residential being there. But sales and traffic, by traffic, I mean foot traffic to the mall, increase sales, which increases the income for the tenants. And some of these tenants, their rent's based on sales. You know, there's just a lot of different factors that we have to look at for each one of them.
Yeah,
No.
I would say it can't be a broad sweeping brush. I mean, we negotiate rents and leasing negotiates rents with each individual tenant, national versus regional. And the residential component, I can tell you, speaking with our tenants and our key tenants, they're very excited about having a work play environment here at Danbury. we are and have been successful about our creative uses. Macerich as a company is a great development company, and we have expertise in this. Really, our tenants are seeing a great increase in business since the pandemic. Our positioning on the target and the round one are strategic, and they were planned for many, many years in a pipeline and got held up really kind of with the pandemic. We're very excited about moving forward with all these initiatives. This is a plan template that I think we use throughout our Macerich portfolio that's been very successful. Most tenants are ranking high in their districts. They are very happy about business here. Certainly there's one-off tenants that need to strategize on their own brands and be creative with their own brand recognition, but we work with them daily. And so we just think the residential and everything we're doing here is going to help the success of the center, the asset, and the long-term stability for the center.
Thank you very much. For those listening and not viewing, the first speaker was Tawny Farmer and the second speaker was Maura Ruby. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions at this time? We have time to ask questions, but does anybody have any now? Okay, I was going to ask a question only as it relates to residences and the potential of emptying out into the concourse after hours. And I guess this would be for Ms. Ruby or Ms. Farmer. So tell me about the average store closes at a certain time, their gate goes down, they're closed. Some stores, however, are restaurants that have longer hours. So they open and close into the mall. For example, now you have a diner. Is that a 24-hour diner?
Pretty much
So-
it is. But
so
you
they-
know,
They don't have any doorway from the outside, so the people would still walk into the concourse of the mall to go to
No.
that diner?
yeah, all these tenants, round one, all these unique tenants have exterior access. We close our gates inside. The mall is secure.
Okay,
Inside.
got it.
All the doors, exterior doors lock, the interior gates come down. We actually allow a leniency of a half hour to an hour in some cases to let tenants pull their gate down to make sure people can cross paths and get out to their car instead of walking on the outside of the building.
Oh,
Security is
awesome.
available
Okay.
for escorting, but you know, everybody closes their gates.
Oh, great. Okay, good. And I don't know if it's worth it to ask at this point in time, but how would you control if the mall closes and the stores are all closed and your gates are down from hallway to hallway to section? I would assume you're going to want to not allow any of the residences or any of those tenants to be roaming through the halls either, right?
Correct. It'd be treated
Okay.
just like any other tenant. They would be
Just
locked
like
out.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions at this time? So I'm going to continue on asking if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Oh, I see the hand of PJ Prunty. PJ
Yes.
Prunty, yes, go ahead. You have the floor. Go ahead, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I
Good evening.
appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. For the
Absolutely.
record, my name is PJ Prunty. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce. I want to apologize for being off camera, but I am squeezing this in between flag football, Taco Tuesday, and bedtime. So I'm sorry I'm not presentable here for camera. So I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the Danbury Mall's petition for a new mixed-use regional mall zoning district. I actually had the opportunity to participate in the city's recent plan of conservation and development, and with no surprise, the mall and really the future of the mall and potential uses came up frequently in our conversations. I was pleased to see that the Planning Commission unanimously approved the mall's master plan last week and recognizes the unique opportunity that the city has here to adapt with the changing marketplace and really meet the needs of the consumers and the residents within our community. You know, as Attorney Beecher eloquently stated, the Danbury Fair Mall has really continually bucked the trend that we've seen nationwide, as well as unfortunately in the state, regarding malls meeting their unfortunate fates due to lack of creativity, ingenuity, flexibility, and really the ability to recognize the factors to adjust their business plans accordingly, which we see them all proactively doing now. The chamber thinks this is a step in the right direction to assure that the Danbury Fair Mall, which is one of the single largest sales tax revenue generator in our state, and a true relevant hub of commerce, can continue to contribute significantly to the overall economic well-being of the greater Danbury economy. So I thank you all for your time and your service to our community. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Prunty, without seeing you, and it was like listening to the radio. You have that radio voice. You have that DJ radio voice. You can do the news and you can spin records. It sounded terrific. Commissioner members, any questions?
I've heard I have a face for radio, so.
And you stand-up comic. Commission members, anything of Mr. Prunty at this time? Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? I'm not hearing any or seeing any. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. I see Councilman Chianesi's camera went on. Councilman Rotello. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone wishing in opposition? Councilman Chianesi. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Harry up there next. We'll go to you next. Go ahead, Councilman Chianesi.
Again, I'm going to take an optimistic approach to this. Well, I'm not necessarily in disagreement with the plan of allowing apartments and additional uses. My major disagreement is with the digital signs. I would like to see that not be part of this application, because the digital signs are not technically allowed in the city of Danbury. This would be the only zone that does allow a digital sign in it. Most zones are just time and temperature, and that's old school. We know it's old school. All the digital signs you see around town were all approved by ZBA under a hardship rule. And I said it in those applications, and I'll say it again here. If the city wishes to allow digital signs, the city should come up with regulations that apply to the entire city, to all the commercial zones, to allow digital signs, and not just a specific district or the mall. If one allows it, we all should allow it. So there's no reason why Marcus Plaza can't have a digital sign, or Danbury Square can't have a digital sign. So, I think you need to consider those as well when you approach this digital signs. Because when I read the application and I read the uses, I get a vision in my head of Las Vegas, to see those digital lights that are going on and off 24 hours a day. And, that's the vision I have in my head. And, for those who live on the west side, especially around the mall like I do, when the mall goes off at 9:30, it's dark on that road. It's almost like the good old days when the fair was around. When the fair wasn't in session, it's dark. The road is dark, and it's like an old country road. The vision now, you're going to have this sign going 24 hours a day, even though it's only 30 seconds intervals. It's going to be on all the time, constantly going all day long. And it's not going to give, to my opinion, an approach what I like to see along Bacchus Avenue. It's a major change to that street. So I would like to see some considerations that if it is wind up being approved, that the sign goes off when the mall closes. It's not a 24/7 sign. When 9:30 hits, or 10 o'clock, or Christmas, when the mall closes, the sign shuts off as well. Because that's what it does now, except for I think Danbury Fair might be lit up, but the sign itself is not a bright sign. And I think that'll go a long way to help with the neighborhood. And we don't want it to get out of hand, to be all lights 24 hours. So that's my major concern on it. I would like to see the applicant give us a picture of what this sign would actually look like in full use. Because remember, this commission is approving the blueprints to which the planning commission has to apply. So you should at least get a picture of what this sign's going to look like before the planning commission has to apply these regs. So it's your turn, you have the bite at the apple right now to regulate these conditions. So, you know, you might say 400 square feet, that may be too big. Maybe I need to downsize it because it doesn't fit here, or make it a special exception. You know, so I think more consideration needs to go into the matter regarding digital signs than just adding it in and saying a 30-second intervals. Well, that was a ZBA requirement for Carluzzi's, the 30-second. There is no regulations in the City of Danbury regs that go over digital signs, except for the 30-second requirement, which ZBA imposed on Carluzzi's. I don't know what Stu Leonard's has for their conditions, but I don't think they got a 30-second requirement for them. And I think ShopRite has it, but I don't know what their requirements are. So the 30-second thing may be too long, maybe too short. I just don't know without having the proper thing. But I would still like to see some type of digital rendering what this sign would actually look like before you even approve it. So if you do close the public hearing tonight, I would hope you keep it open to at least request what this would look like at full tilt. So at least the neighborhood will see, okay, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I'm overreacting, that it will fit nicely into the scheme of things. But the way it is, I think it's going to be, you know, a big flashing every 30 seconds. We have a big event coming on. Macy's has a sale, and this has a sale, and I have a round one has a special thing going on, and you know that's what I vision. And I don't think that's the proper that we want to see on the west side. So thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for those.
Thank you, Councilman Chinese. Attorney Beecher and Ms. Calitro will respond to that when they have their time. Thank you. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Chinese at this time? Thank you. I see the hand of Paul Harry. Please, Paul Harry, identify yourself and just you have the floor. Help yourself.
Yes, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Paul Heary. I live on Briarwoods Lane here in Danbury. My list of items has gotten longer as I've listened to this meeting tonight. My primary concern, number one, is if we add an additional 124 housing units within the mall footprint, that's going to have a considerable impact on the infrastructure in Danbury, specifically schools. Our schools are already overcrowded, and our student costs per student per year are over $15,000. I'd really like to know how that's going to be revenue, or that income is going to be generated. So that's my first concern. My second concern is the WestCog referral. Believe me, I reviewed all the docs that were available to me prior to this meeting this evening. I did not have the opportunity to review the WestCon referral document. I'd like to see those referral, and I'd also like to see the regulations that Attorney Beecher referenced that he indicated actually apply to this situation. Other than that, I'm just guessing in the dark. Now let's move forward to something else here. Ms. Ruby stated that residents would not be able to access the mall concourse after hours. So let's discuss open space. The petitioner and Mrs. Calitro, in their documentation, neglected to highlight how the petition specifically overwrites the requirements of zoning regulations 3I2 regarding open space. They did adhere to minimal usable open space and recreation area of 500 square feet per dwelling unit. That's good. But they called out some specifics that really do not agree with the existing zoning regulations. Number one is that there will be additional ways that they could meet that requirement. Number one was roof gardens. I understand that. The second one was interior publicly accessible concourses within the building or any buildings interconnected to the residential building on the MIRM site. that kind of contradicts what Ms. Ruby stated. Right? There is also provision for getting some approvals for other space. But 3I2 calls out specifically open space for the common use of all residents on the lot and their guests to be used for passive recreation, playing fields, play lots, hiking trails, and or picnic areas. And this, I'm going to say emphatically, provided such space is open to the sky. I don't believe that any of the internal concourse within the mall are open to the sky. So there's that conflict with the existing regulations, and it appears that they're trying to be overwritten here with this specific petition. And I also agree with Commissioner Melillo on the issue with the teenagers. So with that all said, I could not, if I had a vote, I would not approve this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission members, any questions of Mr. Harry at this time? Just taking notes here. They will, in the rebuttal portion, I'm sure they will address those issues for you, Mr. Harry. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Councilman Rotello.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
No, can you get a little, try to get a little closer to the mic? I don't know how you're set up over there.
Is that any better?
Yeah, a little bit better.
You seem to be able to hear me the last time, though.
Here
huh?
you go. No, we were straining last time. I just didn't want to cut you off.
No, when I was on mic when I shouldn't have been. I was on the phone with Perkins.
Oh, yeah, we heard you. We heard Perkins too. Go
Okay.
ahead.
You know, zoning is binary. We either approve it or we don't. We generally don't do contract zoning, minus a few rare circumstances like things like that. And it's the same thing with these public portion of the public comment. We either speak in favor or we speak against. There really ought to be a third option, like, do you just have any questions or do you want to make some comments? I'm generally in favor of the proposal. We are all very much aware, hyper aware. People in Danbury politics are hyper aware of our grand list and the importance that the grand list has to the running of the city. And a member of the grand list community that contributes as much as the mall does is first and foremost in our thoughts, and we want to protect the mall as much as we possibly can. So anything, and I have been supporting the changes to the mall for years now. Anything that can help support the mall is something, you know, within reason, something that would be looked upon favorably by city officials in Danbury. There are some concerns. Councilman Chinese brought one up. I also have concerns about electronic signs. Not only do I share his concern, but I also have some questions through Attorney Beecher, who's stating that at the moment, stores on the inside of the mall can't have signs allow them unless their wall happens to be adjacent to, and there's wall space on the outside of the mall where they can put a sign. We kind of went through that with something that happened with the Chamber of Commerce at the Green recently. So I'm a little unsure of where that would go. Does that mean that every operator in the mall gets a sign outside the mall? And if that's the case, how many would there be? Would they also be digital? I mean, they're going to be 150 signs outside the mall. Are they going to be on the roof? Are they going to be on the outside of the building? Are they going to be in a giant stack someplace like you'll see at strip malls? Not a huge fan of that. So on the one hand, we've got the mall electronic sign. On the other, we have all these other little signs. If I'm correct in that, Attorney Beecher or Moira or anybody else can answer that at some point. So there is those issues with the signage. Another big issue is the conversion of the fair, the Danbury Fair to the mall. The Danbury Fair was essentially comprised almost entirely of permeable surface. Even the parking lots are permeable. The mall obviously is not, and it's in a way designed to flood and has flooded. Someone mentioned earlier about the retention ponds, keeping them maintained. I think that the mall can do a better job with that. At some point, they were completely grown over, and Councilman Chinese and I made sure that they were cleaned up. It was about 10 years ago. But I noticed they're skinning over with vegetation at this point, and I think that they need to be attended to. We've also brought in the Army Corps of Engineer after years of advocating that they come, and they're now working on a plan that's going to hopefully address flooding from Sanford's Pond at Farrington Woods all the way down to Main Street. The issue with speeding up the flow, obviously, is you simply move the water from one place to another. And if we speed up the flow, in other words, if we reduce the amount of time the mall is underwater, it means we have to move that water downtown. So it affects everything downstream. The issue here is that when the mall floods and the parking lots prevent access to the mall closes, the doors close. It's bad enough for the shops and bad enough for the people making a living there. But the major issue would become closing the mall off to people who live there. It becomes a fundamentally different issue if the Lord and Taylor building is filled with 125 apartments and they can't access those apartments. That's going to put a lot of pressure on city services to deal with them, to help them out. We see this with Jensen's. Everybody who moves into Jensen's knows that Jensen's floods occasionally, but it doesn't prevent the city from sending EMT services, police and fire over there to help them out when they occasionally flood. But this could potentially overwhelm or at least by a factor of several increase the amount of attention that would have to be spent on the west side because of flooding. Again, right now when the mall floods and the parking lots make the building inaccessible, it's just stores and the stores can close. When there's people living there and they can't get to their house, they can't get to their oxygen, they can't get to their pets, or they're in there and they can't get out, that's a fundamentally different problem. And I don't know how that's going to be addressed. Again, the Corps is working on something, but that could be years down there. It could be a decade away. I have not heard of a plan that's going to keep them all from flooding. I haven't heard of a plan that's going to keep those buildings from not being accessible during floods that we seem to be having more and more in the Northeast. Somebody mentioned, I think it was Commissioner Jowdy, about the uneasy mix between retail, commercial, industrial, and residential. And that's true. And we've seen this again and again. And while I don't particularly have a problem putting residences inside the Lord and Taylor building, I guarantee you that if they go in there and the mall pivots down the road, there's going to be a lot of blowback from the residences. It's one thing, it just seems to be a fact of life that you can move somebody into a 50-acre parcel that's next to a cement factory, but you can never, ever, ever build a cement factory next to a 50-acre parcel of existing residential properties without the residents going ballistic. So if you put 125 units in there and then you decide to add a desperately needed tax-paying business like a Round One, it could put a tremendous amount of pressure on this commission and also on people on the council to advocate on behalf of the new residents to prevent something like that from happening. So that's an issue that we have to face. So we have to recognize that when you add residences to existing commercial, it's a lot easier than adding commercial to existing residences. And once the residents go in, that's going to be the problem that you face. I'm assuming that most of the residents are going to the Lord and Taylor building. I'm assuming also that under these regulations, the residences, as small a percentage of them as there are, 91,000 square feet or something like that, have to be put into the existing structure. I'm not sure if that means it has to be inside or they could be built outside. I noticed the mall is building a structure outside the actual mall building itself, the arch entrance to round one. Could garden apartments be essentially built attached to the mall, but outside the building itself, backed up against the exterior wall, or would that be impossible? That's another question that I have. Somebody, I think it was Attorney Beecher, mentioned over 6,000 current parking spaces and dialing that down to 4,000. If I heard that correctly, that's a reduction of approximately a third. That seems like an awful lot of parking spaces to lose. And then the enclosed space versus open space, a resident brought up an interesting issue that, you know, we all know what open space is, and it's not a hallway in a building, no matter how big the hallway is. That's just not open space. You know, I have an issue with the interpretation of those regulations. I think it's kind of cheating a little bit. And yeah, you've got all these giant concourses, but they're not open space. And if it turns out you can't use them after 9:30 at night anyway, they shouldn't really apply. There should be some space outside the building where people can be outside and look at the sky and you know, stick their tongue out and catch a snowflake if they want to do that. If they're having some issues, if they're depressed or something like that, to get out of their cubicle, get out of their habitat and go outside, breathe some air and be able to do that. I'm not sure that that's really being offered under this proposal. If the meeting is continued, I'm going to have a couple of other things, but at this point, I think that that's it. Again, these are questions about the process. They're questions about the plan going forward. I think it's pretty clear my feelings about PNDs in general. Removing, and I alluded to this earlier more directly, removing the ability of people to participate in the process. This is a good public process, but once this is done and the rules are incorporated, the next process, the next use, the next thing that the Planning Commission will be determining will probably be a permitted use that may be a special exception now. And that will eliminate the public's ability to comment. One interesting thing about the mall is that if you took a chalk line and dragged it to the nearest residential property, there wouldn't be enough line in your little chalk thing to get there. It's pretty far away from most of the residences. I think it's closest probably to the buildings on the east, West Terrace, ironically enough named West Terrace, but I think that that's probably the closest. I don't think this is necessarily going to have a deleterious impact on residences in the area, minus the issue with the signs at night and things like that, and how they may affect the flight path. But really, what goes on inside that building, whether people are living there or they're recreating there or they're shopping there, is not really going to have much of an impact to the neighbors. As was mentioned tonight, it could very much have an impact on the school system and the money that goes into educating these students. That's a conversation for a different day. And it would depend entirely really on the amount of students in those 125 apartments and how much in taxes those apartments would generate. It's possible. It happens. It's happening in the reserve right now, and it's also happening in a couple of downtown projects, that the taxes that these developments pay exceed the cost of educating those students. But there are other developments where that's reversed, and they're not paying enough to educate their own students. That's not how we, how we, roll in Danbury. We don't charge you for your students. It's everybody's in this together. But we have to keep our eye on the ball here. Danbury, as a growing community, is facing tremendous pressure in trying to afford the students. The city of Hartford, the state of Connecticut in Hartford is being next to impossible in helping us out. It's our money. We send it to Hartford, we're one of the communities that sends a tremendous amount of money to Hartford. We get very little back, and we get very little back for education. I know that's a point of extreme contention with people on both sides of the aisle, but the fact remains that Hartford is not, in my opinion, doing everything it can for Danbury. So we have to do it ourselves. And we really have to watch every nickel on this one. So that point about how much is this going to affect the school system is well taken. That's all I have. Again, I'd like to reserve some comments if the meeting is continued. I may have a few more, but I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for your time. Good luck, mall officials, with this project. The city of Danbury is behind you. We want you to be as strong and as healthy and robust as you possibly can, and continue to be as good a neighbor as you've been. We just want this done in a participatory fashion and done responsibly, which it looks pretty much to me like it's a direction that it's moving in now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Rotella. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Rotella at this time? Councilman Rotella, I'm sure your questions will be answered or addressed in the rebuttal. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Attorney Beecher, would you like to have any comments?
Sure.
Any comments?
Let me just address the signs a little bit in a little bit more detail. First of all, with respect to freestanding signs, this particular regulation allows a site with a large building like the mall has to have one large freestanding sign for every 1,000 feet of frontage on a road. So if you are able to have more than one on a particular road, those two signs have to be located at least 600 feet apart. Only one freestanding sign can be digital. There can be no digital on any of the signs on the walls of the mall buildings. So it's only one digital sign on the entire mall property would be allowed by this regulation. And that digital sign has to essentially be 1/2 of the total sign size, maximum of 200 square feet. There are other digital signs in Danbury, and Councilman Janice mentioned them. City Hall, for one, that changes. I see it every morning. The timing changes from 5 seconds to 25 seconds, but that one changes. Caroluzzi's has one. Stu Leonard's has probably one of the largest in the city. There's actually 2 digital signs on that property. Danbury High School has a digital sign, as does Westcon over at Mill Plain. And ShopRite as well has that one. And yes, the majority of those, I guess, were through variances of the ZBA, but nevertheless, this isn't unprecedented. Why do we want one at the mall? Again, in part because you have all these tenants inside the building who don't get much exposure. So if there's a sign that can change, then they can get some exposure on that sign. With respect to wall signs, because we've made it so they don't have to have their space right behind that wall, that's all well and good, but this regulation doesn't allow any signage on the parking garage. This regulation only allows up to 5% of the walls, excluding the parking garage, to have signage. So in other words, it's not unlimited wall signage that's allowed by this regulation. Currently, the signs at the mall are slightly over 3% of the wall at the wall area of the mall. Just to give you some perspective, one of the largest shopping centers in the city of Danbury has wall signage because it's fortunate enough to be a shopping center, and therefore all those tenants get to have their signage. It's over 4%. So at 5% for a building this size is not a lot of signage, but those tenants, and Maura can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about 100 tenants or so interior facing with no way of any exposure except for foot traffic. So if we can get some exposure for them with one LED sign out of a potential of 3 and get them a little exposure on the walls, that's good for the foot traffic. It's good for those tenants. It's good for their business. With respect to open space comes in a variety of types under the current regulations, which includes community rooms, which are indoors. And so an interior concourse is indoors. Some park areas for certain communities actually close, maybe at dusk. So it's not unheard of to have open space that's available to your residents, but it does close at a certain time. Now, one particular group that's very interested in doing the residential component in the Lord and Taylor space are in fact going to have some green space around the perimeter of that particular anchor site. So there will be some outdoor green space. And obviously, we've also had discussions with the department about trails along the perimeter of the mall site. And so, I mean, it's under consideration. And obviously, if you have a project like this, just like any project for the commercial tenants, you're doing it and you want to make sure that this is something that will sell. This is something that people want. You don't want to do something that in fact will turn everybody off. And so it's all under consideration and has been thought through. With respect to tenants, at a mall, there are, look at the downtown Danbury. There's apartments up and down Main Street. Those people live within close proximity to package stores, restaurants, other forms of entertainment, things you might not want your children to go near. But that's a fact of life in certain areas. And so if people want to move into these efficiency apartments, studios, or 1-bedrooms, and yes, there's a few 2-bedrooms, they are going to know what they're moving into. So it's not like this would be a brand new residential experience that no one has ever experienced before. I mean, downtown has numerous apartments with a variety of uses and a variety of very nice things downtown. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dumping on the downtown, but I'm just saying it's a very similar thing to have a bunch of variety of uses near apartments. With respect to Mr. Rotell's question about are we reducing over 6,400 parking spaces down to 4,000? No, the difference is I was relating what we actually have on site, which is the 6,475. The regulation that allows us to have a different formula kicks in if you have 4,000 spaces or more on your site. So in other words, we will qualify for that. But if there was a property in Danbury seeking to be a MIRM district that only had 3,900 parking spaces, they would not qualify for the different formulas. So that's what the 6,000 versus 4,000 was all about. We're not reducing the parking. Obviously, we need a lot of that parking as it is. In terms of freestanding signs that are not entrance signs, we've only asked to have 2, and one would be for round 1 because they're stuck in that corner between LL Bean and the main entrance. And they don't have anything other than that one exterior entrance, which was important to this commission on a prior application, but they don't really have much in the way of exterior exposure. So one freestanding sign within 50 feet of the building would be there, and then one to spare for somebody else. But those won't be located all over the place, nor are we allowed to build a new building for residential. So we wouldn't be filling in that space, Mr. Rotello, with apartments. The apartments have to be an existing portion of the building as it exists if this regulation passes. And on the day that we apply for a zone change to put this property into the zone, It has to be in an existing building in existence at that time. So that hopefully answers your question on that one. I think I covered everybody's questions. Again, in terms of taxes, the News Times reported that the Danbury Fair Mall is in fact the largest taxpayer by more than adding up the next 4 taxpayers together. So, I think they'll help to pay for any students that might go into the schools. But again, there's the studies that were done for Kennedy Flats, studies that were done for the project down at 30 Main. In these types of apartment buildings, you have a very small percentage of potential school children. And that, in Kennedy Flats case, that turned out to be fairly true. Not saying there's none, because there are, but it's pretty low percentage. Did I cover it, Mr. Chairman?
That's that couple things. I do go through the checklist. So, and thank you for that. A couple things. I think it's going to be very difficult to say, let's just say it's the Lord and Taylor space, if that's what everybody's volunteering, that is what it's going to be. It's very difficult to see how the assessment of the building will change when it's apartments as opposed to the Lord and Taylor. I don't really know if apartments, if there's going to be any difference in taxes. It's just such a big, gigantic building. What's the difference between a Lord and Taylor structure and a bunch of apartments from a property tax standpoint? It's very hard to calculate. So
to be honest, I've heard from some clients that own significant apartment buildings over the last 2 years, and the reval has bumped those up pretty good.
Oh, really? Wow, that's interesting. Well, there you go. The other thing is, I don't know if you want to talk about, yes, you did get through everything on the checklist except flooding. And we did talk about age of tenants a little bit, but that was raised again after you spoke about that. I think that's difficult to do, but I don't know if there's anything you would just, and then one other thing. Anybody talk anywhere about hours of operation of that digital sign?
Let me start with the drainage while
Thank you.
While Tony and Maura might want to talk about the digital sign if they're willing. That particular area of the mall, again, we're talking about Lord and Taylor, even though we're talking about regulations, and this is just a particular site that might be governed by these regulations. The Lord and Taylor site is not one where the water comes to the building or comes close to the building. I mean, the places where the water builds up is around on the northwest corner a little bit more and over on the southern side, but this particular area doesn't. And obviously that's also being worked on. Mr. Otello even mentioned the fact that the Army Corps, I guess, is also working with the city on this project, which is obviously going to involve our client as well. So I'm not overly concerned at all. And I've been representing them all for a long period of time now. I'm not overly concerned at all about somehow those residents not being able to get in and out of their units or being able to park or being impacted by those types of events. So anybody want to talk about potentially saying we'll turn the signs off at whenever the mall closes? Turn the digital sign off when the mall closes.
Maura, do you shut the signs off now at night and just keep the pylon on, or are they on all night?
The pylon just remains on.
Okay. Typically what we do with our digital signs anyway is at night, the brightness of the display is turned down. So during the day, it's brighter than it is at night. We could set a automatic timer and have it shut off, say an hour after the mall closes or something like that. And, one thing I wanted to mention too is, the big interest in getting these new signage is so that we can put tenant panels on them. Right now, the signage we have just says Danbury Fair Mall. And we have tenants who have passed on the site because they can't have their name on a tenant panel on the sign. So this new regulation allows us to have tenant panels. on that variable message sign, on the electronic sign, we could also show tenant panels like 4 at a time that change every 30 seconds. So it allows more people to be on the sign itself. Nothing on this display will be flashing or blinking or animated. It's just static images that change every 30 seconds. So it's not obnoxious at all. I don't believe there's any residential, all that, like was said earlier, all that close to the building, but we could definitely shut it off at night. There's no one to advertise to at night. So all that could be worked out when we actually develop the signage design and get approval for the specifics of that.
Thank you very much. That sounds good. It sounds like being a good neighbor. One of the neighbors did mention that. It sounds good. I did actually, listen, I'm the layperson. I don't have the knowledge that you guys have in this industry, but I envision that digital sign as having 4 or 5 different stores being on it and changing every 30 seconds to give them exposure like that. So that sounds like a good idea, but then again, I would yield to your knowledge on that. But yeah, while we're on the subject, to shut that sign down at a particular hour is going to ease the minds of a lot of people. And thank you for that. And I don't know, Attorney Beecher, anything else that you want to?
I don't think so. I think the
Right.
questions were very good, and hopefully we've addressed them.
And I'm going to ask if the commissioners have any questions right now of you, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Calitro to sum up if she has any final comments as well. Commission members, is there anything that you would like to ask or need more information on from Attorney Beecher at this time, or Ms. Calitro? Commission members? I don't see any hands or hear anything. Ms. Calitro, did you have anything you wanted to add in before we talk about what we're going to do here?
I just wanted to make a comment on Mr. Heary's comments relative to the Westcog referral.
Yeah.
And I know he wanted to see more than that. I just want to say that irrespective of whether the COG agrees that they count or don't count on the appeals list, they are deed restricted as affordable units under the 8-2G and 8-39A statutes. They are affordable housing, irrespective of whether they go on some list or not. They are deed restricted for 40 years. End of story. So I don't think we need to, again, whether they have a different opinion relative to they count or they don't count on the list.
Yeah.
Again, their opinion, they've counted for, I can say they've counted for us under this, the way it's written, but it almost doesn't matter. They are still deed restricted as affordable units pursuant to those statutes based on how that language is written. No question about it.
I understand, but let me run this by you. I think Mr. Harry said that, talked about what we talked about earlier, what Commissioner Malilla brought up. The link wasn't active. He didn't see it. He doesn't have it in his possession, and he wants to be able to read it, to be able to comment on it. So I think our choices are here to keep the public hearing open for anything, keep the public hearing open only for the admission of the actual document of the Westcog's report, or close the public hearing. I think that's what we have before us. And I just want to see what, I think it's a technicality that I don't want to get stung on, is all I'm saying.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. Those are your options.
Yeah,
It doesn't really hurt. I'm just clarifying for the record that irrespective of whether it goes on the appeals list or not, it is a deed restricted unit subject to income restrict. The tenants are income restricted.
Definitely. I don't see a reason, unless a commission member wants to chime in on this, I don't see a reason to keep the public hearing open blank, just open for the next meeting. I think we've touched base on everything. If we do keep it open, I think it would be only to receive and post and give everybody an advance notice of the next couple of weeks of what the Westcon one-page report said. And anybody have any opinions on that? Commissioner Malillo, you would originally raise at the beginning. What say you, Commissioner Malillo?
Mr. Header, I'd like to address your question this way, if I may. And I'd like to address your question by offering a motion, because and here's my thinking, because I actually have another question too in regards to this, which I wanted to pose through the chair to another commission member. But again, I don't feel as though that's the best thing to do without having a motion on the floor first.
Okay,
So for that purpose, noting that we can have a motion to discuss, I would like to make a motion right now to close the public hearing. But again, like I said, I do want to have a little bit of a discussion on it, and I do have at least one question to that I would like to pose to you to another commission member.
okay, so you just talked about it. You're making a motion to close the public hearing.
Yes, yeah.
And we'll have discussion if there's a second on. Is there a second on that to close the public hearing? Commission members, is there a second to close the public hearing? There's a second by Commissioner Hylinski. Any discussion? It's time for discussion. Commissioner Malolo.
Yeah, so I would like, if you may, give me opportunity for 2 points for discussion. The first one, through you, I'd like to ask Mr. Bennett a question.
Absolutely.
Mr. Bennett, Commissioner Bennett, you had asked a question earlier to the mall regarding the rent, and you had actually, in your question, you alluded to the fact that maybe you might have wanted to receive some additional information from that. I was curious if you were satisfied with their response, if you felt you needed more information, or if you felt, knowing that potentially the mall would be coming back before us with a rezoning petition, if you would be revisiting that question during a motion to rezone the property rather than a regulation related motion or amendment petition.
Yeah, just to clarify that the mall is not looking for this tonight. This is just a regulation that we're looking to either approve or reject, and at a future date, the mall will come in if this is approved. So you understand that, Commissioner Bennett, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to clarify.
Well, I don't think I got my answer, but I honestly didn't expect an answer. That was a tough question to ask them how they're going to handle their rent. All I would like to do is let them know that the rent is an issue for me and for the tenants of that property. So I do know that Mora has some very happy people there, but I also know that there's just as many people that are not as happy there. So somebody's going to make a lot of money, which is wonderful. They're making a big investment into that mall, which I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of this whole project that we're dealing with tonight. But the rent stabilization is a big question for me. I want to see those people stay with fairness.
Okay.
So
Thank
you're gonna reserve that again at the next meeting when the mall comes in, I guess.
Yeah, at a more specific location related discussion instead of a amendment to amend the regs.
What was the second issue you had, Commissioner?
Secondly, so I had asked Ms. Calitro earlier about the the particulars behind the WestCog recommendation, and then I was for just to see what we were adhered to. There's a part of me that says if somebody stood before us this evening and read a record in a letter or a petition or some things that they had signed into the record, if somebody said, you know what, I didn't get to see that until tonight, it was presented tonight, I couldn't see it in advance. I don't want to get in a position where we set a precedent. Well, we'll keep it open so you can see that, and then maybe assemble people to counterbalance it. Because then we get down the road with multiple aspects of it. So for that reason, I really feel as though it's limited, more to the affordability aspect, which Ms. Calitro mentioned really is not a major component here. So I, having been one who have read that report, the recommendation while you read it tonight and prior to, I think I'm comfortable with us closing the public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Commission members, any other discussion? This is the time for discussion on the motion. Any other discussion, commission members? Any other discussion, commission members? Commissioner David?
Yeah, this is such a big decision that I just feel that you have to keep this public hearing open for another 2 weeks and just control it. You don't have to let it get out of hand.
Well, I mean, we're talking about closing the public hearing. We won't necessarily be voting on it. We may or may not be voting on it tonight, but I don't know what additional information we would get in the next 2 weeks.
Well, I got to tell you something, is that these meetings keep getting longer and longer. And some of us work, and we get up early. And I just tell you, if you would, I know you're not going to vote tonight, but I couldn't vote on it tonight if you wanted to. It's just so much information. It's a big decision. So I don't think it's a big deal keeping it open another 2 weeks.
All right. Commission members, any other discussion? Any other discussion, commission members? Anybody have any comments? Commissioner Melillo.
Just a comment, we had, in looking at who we had present this evening, we had Mr. Coelho present, former commission member, current city council member. I know he's here, for a concern as to what's going on, knowledge basis. We have 2 other council members who spoke, and then really 1 member of the public. We had, it was duly noted, it was publicized. And I think had we had an outpouring of people here tonight, looking for various comments, questions, looking for further information, then maybe we would be getting more information. But like you said earlier, I don't know what further information we would be receiving from this. So with that being said, I would support closing the public hearing. And so while earlier, when I originally offered the motion, I was actually offering the motion with being willing to withdraw it. At this point in time, I'm comfortable with keeping the motion on the floor.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Any other discussion? So commission members, to recap, we have a motion to close the public hearing by Commissioner Melillo, second by Commissioner Hylinski. We're going to go to a voice vote. Commissioner Melillo, a yes is to close, a no is a yes is a yes, a no is a no. Yeah. Commissioner Hylinski.
Yes.
Commissioner Botello.
Yes.
Commissioner David.
No.
Commissioner Bennett.
No.
Commissioner Hawley.
Yes.
Commissioner Jowdy.
No.
I will vote yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. We have 8, right? 5, 3. This public hearing is closed. Okay, again, for everybody out there listening, the next public hearing is September 26th. Continuation of public hearings, there are none. Under old business for discussion of possible action, it is a petition by the, all these papers. It's a petition by the city of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 3E9D and 10A1A of the zoning regulations, in parentheses, change of issuing authority for a certificate of location approval for motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses from zoning commission to zoning enforcement officer. Public hearing was open on September 12th and it was closed on September 12th. There was a motion to move it to old discussion for old business for discussion possible action. That's what we're doing now. Commission members. I know Commissioner Melillo, you were the one that moved it over or made the motion to. So I'm not saying anything,
I respect that, Commissioner Haddad, but this is one of those aspects where I would prefer not to be the motion maker.
Yeah, I kind of thought you wanted to prove a point on this one. Commission members, anybody want to make a motion on this? Commissioner Jowdy, your light went on. You want to make a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve, and if somebody wants to help out with some different points. on
Sure. How
approval,
about if you
take them.
would agree? How about if you would agree to this? That this petition complies with the Plan of Conservation Development because it ensures compliance with Public Act 23-40, which became effective July 1st, 2023, and the state statutes that govern the motor vehicle dealers and repairers licenses. Would you put that as a reason for your motion?
Sure, you're more prepared than I am.
Yes. Is there a second to the motion to approve with the reason as stated?
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Hawley. Commission members, any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion?
Mr. Haddad,
Yes, Commissioner Melillo.
for discussion purposes, I would just like to note my comments during the public hearing.
Okay. City of Danbury. Jody motion. Who made the second was Wally? Okay, any other comment, commission members, any other comment? There was a motion to approve with a reason, seconded as well. A yes is yes, a no is no. Commissioner Jowdy,
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Helinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Botello,
Yes.
Commissioner David,
I abstain.
abstained. Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Malillo.
I can comfortably vote no, Mr. Haddad.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I could as well. I think I'll vote no too, to prove a point to Hartford. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 2 noes, and 1 abstention. Did you get that same thing, Ms. Reed? Same calculation. Congratulations, City of Danbury and Sharon B. Calitro. This passes. All right. I feel good about it. I feel good about the position I took, as tiny as it was.
Right?
Let's see, under new business. Petition City of Danbury by Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend section 6A5G and 10B52F of the zoning regulations. Amend certificate of location approval issuing authority from zoning commission, zoning enforcement officer for automobile and truck sales in the IL40 zone, and amend permit fee language for location approvals. This public hearing is scheduled for October 24th, 2023. Ms. Calitro, this sounds kind of like what we just finished 30 seconds ago.
I know it, it's on me. I should have, I missed it, a reference in another section. And
That's all-
so I
all right.
didn't want to amend the petition because we already noticed it. So I have to submit a new one. I
That's
know you
fine.
don't like it, but
I'm
it's
just teasing, just.
I know it is. So just, yeah, motion to accept and refer.
Yeah. And petition by Bright Ravens IS
But
Danbury.
Mr. Chairman, you have to accept the petition and
Oh.
refer it.
Where is that thing over here?
Number 1.
Mr.
Okay,
Haddad, while you're looking for it, I'll make a motion to accept the petition, refer to the planning commission for a recommendation, post in the town clerk's office, post in the zoning commission office, notice
Thank you.
any
All
entity
surrounding communities.
needs to be reported to under statutes, and set the public hearing for October 24th, 2023.
You got it. Thank you. You saved me from having to look it up. Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Hawley. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Number 2, petition of Bright Ravens IS Danbury LLC, amend sections 5B2 and 5B4 of the zoning regulations, in parentheses, add hotel conversion with specific use requirements as permitted use in the CA80 zone. Public hearing scheduled for October 24th, 2023. Is there a motion to receive the petition, refer to the planning commission for the recommendation, notify all surrounding communities that need to be notified according to state statutes, published in the town clerk's office and all of the necessary required publications according to state statutes, and set the public hearing date as it is for this evening for October 24th, 2023. See, I've got to read it. Commissioner Malillo has it memorized. Anybody want to make that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Is there a second?
I'll
by
second.
Commissioner Hawley, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Not hearing any. Under correspondence, none. For reference only, nothing. And under other matters, let me just take this opportunity to read a letter from now Councilman Michael Coelho, dated September 5th, 2023, Theodore J. Haddad Jr., Chairman, regarding his resignation. Dear Chairman Haddad, as you are aware, I've recently been asked and approved to serve on the city council. Although there is no conflict with filling both positions, I feel it is only fair to let someone else fill my seat on the zoning commission and give them an opportunity to serve, which is why I will be stepping down from the zoning commission effective today, September 5th, 2023. I am truly grateful and honored to have been elected and to be part of the zoning commission and serve with you and our fellow zoning commission members. It has been a great experience. I also want to take a brief moment to thank Sharon Calitro, Joanne Reed, and the planning department and of the city of Danbury for the dedication, all their hard work. Sincerely, Michael Coelho. And Councilman Coelho, I want to thank you as well for your service, your new service that you're going to be providing to the city. And it was truly a pleasure having you on the zoning commission. You were a contributor, and which was appreciated not by myself and not only by the commission, but by the citizens of Danbury. The issues that you brought up were well thought out and also gave us ideas of which to continue on with further conversation. So I want to thank you for that and wish you the best of luck. And did you created the Coelho Botelho thing, the rhyming thing? So
Yeah, it's a Portuguese thing.
I guess so. So thank you for that. Anything else from any commission members on other matters? Other matters? I say it looks like Councilman Coelho froze. I think he's locked out. I don't see. Yeah, I see he froze in mid-sentence there. Anyway, Commissioner Melillo.
Yes, I'd like to also thank Mr. Coelho for his service on the commission. I wish him Godspeed on the city council, as he's some people think it's a step up, other people think it's a step down. I won't give my opinion on that. But I would like to thank him for all that he did and the insight that he did offer and the perspective that he gave to a lot of the petitions that we saw during his short tenure here.
Yeah, Coelho, one of the good guys. Anything else, commission members? Commissioner Helinski.
I would also like to add to Councilman Coelho, just what Commissioner Melillo said, and Commissioner Haddad, Chairman Haddad, both of you spoke eloquently about this gentleman, and I just want to say thank you, Mike, for being a wonderful contributor to the whole city of Danbury. Anything you do well, and you do it totally and completely with grace and dignity, and I'm going to miss you.
Thank you. Commission members, anything else under other matters? Any other matters? Any other matters? Any other matters? Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn at 10:44? Let's give this one to Commissioner Botelho. Commissioner Botelho makes a motion to adjourn, second by we'll go to Commissioner Bennett, the other new guy. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Let the record show at 10:45 we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. We'll see you
Thank
on
you.
September 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No. Today's September 12th. September.
September
26th.
26th. It's too late. It's getting too late. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Right.